Joe just said we're all set.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Tonight is the February 27th, 2024 meeting of the Easton Planning Board. Thank you all for coming. We are not holding this meeting in a hybrid capacity or through Zoom, so we can skip some of the normal preliminaries that we usually explain when we are remote. So thank you all for being in attendance. I recognize that probably the vast majority of you are interested in the last item on the agenda. We're going to try to go through the other items pretty quickly while we wait for one more member of the board to join us tonight. So the first matter for consideration is the A&R plan on 150 and 152 Lincoln Street. Do we have anyone here? Mr. Ferrier?
Yes, please.
I'll just get my board ready, Mr. Chairman, but
Sure.
What I have is a A&R plan for property at 150 Lincoln Street, and owned by Diane and James Kent. They're just looking to switch over their lot lines. They own two abutting properties. They're not changing their frontage at all. They just want to change the really just the side lot line. Try to get one thing together. Right here, Mr. Chairman, going right through, the frontage remains the same on the two lots. They have a driveway with a series of trees that they've always maintained with their primary residence. They own both homes, as I said. They'd be looking to sell this property, so they just wanted to move the side lot line over so it'll encompass the trees in the driveway that they've always maintained with their property.
What's the reason for the change? What do they need
Just
to
that,
do?
they want to maintain ownership of the trees in the driveway. Right
Oh.
now, they own both properties, so
I see.
the lot line between the two has kind of been irrelevant to them for the last 50 years. So now that they're looking to sell one of them, they just want to make sure that their trees and driveways go with their property, and they don't have to give them up. So frontage remains exactly the same, and they're in excess of the minimum lot area.
Okay. Stephanie, any comments?
No, it meets the requirements. They're non-conforming lots, existing non-conforming lots. They're not increasing the non-conformity. And in fact, I think they're giving more room between the structures than currently exists. So the board can endorse the plan.
Okay. Any questions from our fellow members? All right. With that, I will accept the motion.
Motion to endorse the A&R plan for 150 and 152 Lincoln Street.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay. All right. Motion to endorse Stetson, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Kid, aye.
All right. A&R plan will be endorsed. Thank you.
folks.
All right, the next matter is 523 Foundry Street. It's a continued public hearing. We actually received a request for a continuance to our March 12th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to continue 523 Foundry Street special permit mixed use to the March 12th meeting.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Okay. Motion to continue. Stetson, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Kid, aye.
All right. We've got another one on the definitive subdivision at 149 Lincoln Street. This is also a continued public hearing. There is a request for a continuance to our April 1st meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to continue 149 Lincoln Street to April 1st, 2024.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Motion to continue. Stetson, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Kid, aye.
All right. right, and the next one up is the continued site plan review at 661 Washington Street. Mr. Faria?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Faria, Homebred Engineering. As you recall, we were before you folks a couple of weeks ago to look at the additional property that the Volkswagen dealership has acquired. I think we were clear with just about everything. There was just some concerns about the lighting on the property and any potential spillover onto the abutting property, the last residential property, which is right at the bottom of the page. So we've done a couple of things to address that. We have back shields on the lights like we spoke about. In addition to that, we've proposed an additional 5 Colorado blue spruce trees on our property that will further shield the existing home. And we've also proposed an 8-foot stockade fence in that area. We did submit a light plan that was prepared by the lighting manufacturer that shows a 0 spillover onto the abutting property. So I think that was really our only issue at that point.
Has there been any further communication with the abutter at all?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
We're here today.
The abutters are here?
We're here.
Okay. Would you like to speak?
Sure. Do you mind if I take a look at?
Please, come on up. And just for the record, if you could just state your name and your address.
Sure. Jessica Chochi. I'm at 129 Depot Street, Southeaston.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I know there was a meeting a few weeks ago. They wanted to propose some more evergreens and fencing, so thank you for that concern there. My concern, there's 2 things, just safety and also value of my house. You know, having bought the house 8 years ago, it was a completely different landscape than what's going to be here now. So I am very concerned with the property value. I appreciate the lighting concerns because that is almost a full acre of straight property line that will have almost 3 acres of fluorescent light in a parking lot now that will come over and spill into my property. So my concern is the proposed blue spruce, what size those will be once they're planted versus full grown. You know, I don't want to wait 10 years for there to eventually be a barrier, so I don't know if there's a, you know, a
There-
notice on
Yeah,
size.
They're 6 to 7 feet at planting.
At planting, okay. And then also fencing. Right now, there's just a privacy fence for the construction purposes. Once that's gone and there's a couple plantings on the property, it's really just gonna be my property that runs into a parking lot, more or less, or about 10, 15 feet of some green space. My concern is safety with my family, my dog running around the yard and not having a full fence along the line, or either more greenery or more fencing proposed there. So I just, you know, it's an area where there's people roaming the streets. There is theft that happens, you know, right off our front porch. So I'm concerned if there's access from a big parking lot to our property, if there's no barrier of green space or fencing.
If I can just respond to that one, Mr. Chair. Sure. All along the property, there's a combination of 8-foot high stockade fence. Typically, we'll have 6-foot fence. When we met with the board members back in the summertime, we talked about specifically about buffering this particular property at that time before the subject property that we're here tonight, before we had acquired that. And we do have about 180 feet of 8-foot stockade fence along with the Colorado blue spruce. So we're going all the way up adjacent to our proposed building. So that entire stretch of property line is going to be buffered by both the blue spruce and the 8-foot stockade fence.
And in terms of the kind of the security issues, I imagine that there's got to be pretty good security cameras throughout.
There's security. I mean, the lot itself it's open. You know, it's not fenced in. It's not gated off even. But there's heavy security cameras all around the property.
I mean, I imagine they'd have coverage at all points wherever
Agreed.
cars are going to be.
Yep, they do.
And so, can you just maybe explain in a little bit more detail what the photometric plan kind of showed, and maybe just do that in the context of, because we were very concerned at the last meeting about light spillover, how that could impact
Right,
the
it's-
property, which I think could also potentially speak to the property value issue that you raised.
Well, this is the lighting plan, it's a whole bunch of, basically of little numbers here, but what it does is it shows adjacent to each of the light fixtures, the light spilling in each direction, and what we were trying to do after we left the last meeting, the property line is right down here at the bottom of the plan. This is the edge of the parking, these are the light fixtures, directly abutting the property. So we just wanna make sure that along with the fence and the Colorado blue spruce that we're planting, that we have a zero light spillage at the property line. And the lighting plan shows a zero light spillage all along the property line. So at the last meeting, because we didn't have the Colorado spruce in this location, and the lighting manufacturer was looking at a 6-foot fence as opposed to an 8, there was a slight spillage, 0.3 going over the lot line. So by adding the blue spruce directly adjacent to the house, and adding the 8-foot fence as opposed to 6, it got it right down to 0.0. So it shows a 0.0 all along the lot line. So there is no spillage onto the abutting properties.
Okay. Do you have any further comments
I
or
guess,
thoughts?
I just wanna be clear that when there isn't fencing, cause you said there's spacing of fencing, that whatever is there will be sort of a continuous evergreen, so there isn't access, I guess, between fencing and green space, especially
That's
by
the
the
intention,
house.
is to have a solid wall, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
Up until the end, up till you get to the
Up until
building.
just beyond the face of our building, so all the way down the lot line.
So it's not all the way down the lot, but it's about
A good, yeah,
Good portion.
yes.
a little over half, yeah.
Any comments, Stephanie?
Two, my question is, why wouldn't it be extended down the full length of the property line?
Yeah, when we met out there this past summer, it was just agreed, with the board at that time that there was no reason to extend the fencing all the way down the lot line. We determined at that point, there's a greenhouse on the property, we're well beyond the greenhouse. We thought at that point there was nothing to buffer, there was nobody to buffer at that point.
And then the other question was raised by one of the other commissioners, the board members who's not here tonight. How high are the lights?
24 feet,
They are 24 feet.
yes.
But they're all, and they're back and side
Exactly.
shielded,
Yep.
so that all the light is being cast interior
To the middle of the
lot.
parking lot, essentially.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, please.
My name's Dave Sherrill, I'm Jessica Chilton's fiance. I live with her at 129 Depot. We walk the dog every single night on that property, and he likes to go all the way to the back end of the property. I don't see where it's safe for her in the pitch dark to be walking the dog back there and no fence in between. I would like, and we would like to see that fence go all the way to the back of her property. The security cameras aren't gonna catch what's going on her property. They may catch what's going on in the parking lot, but not when she's walking the dog. And I'm not always around, and she's not carrying anything to protect herself. We all heard the story of catalytic converters being stolen. There's stuff going on all the time, and I want her protection. That's what I want.
To be fair, when we came out and looked at it, we weren't considering this addition to the property, because at the time, that property wasn't
Right,
contemplated.
except the addition is way up in the front.
I understand.
We're not changing the back of our property or the back of the abutting property.
I understand.
That hasn't changed at all.
Is it a significant burden to push the fence out to the end of the property line?
I'm
Is
sure
that-
it is, but I'm sure it's not as significant as getting a no, so. I guess we can weigh the significance. Fences aren't cheap, but
Well, I
extending the
just,
fence another 100 feet, or you folks saying no, I'm sure Adam would go along with extending the fence.
and I don't know will say. I'm just, if that's something that you're willing to entertain, it sounds to me like, you know, you're not gonna get too much pushback from your neighbors, and certainly if that's the case, then you're not gonna get too much pushback from us. I'm speaking for myself, of course.
I think we can make that agreement, you know, I can certainly get your revised plan, we can write it into the approval, however you'd like to do it, but I think we can do that.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Any other questions?
I would just comment that I think the, kind of that adage, good fences make good neighbors, is really kind of appropriate here. I think that's a good compromise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we need to, well, I assume you have to get approval from your client first in order to
I'm
do
sure
that.
we're okay.
If he's assuring that we're okay,
So the board could vote to approve with the condition that we won't issue the decision until we see the revised plan showing the full
That's fine.
length of the fence.
okay. Do I have a motion?
I will motion to approve the plan conditional on the revised plans being submitted with the fence extended all the way to the back of the property line. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mhm.
Okay. Motion to approve with the conditions, that's an aye?
Wolf eye?
Kid eye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, folks. I'm gonna keep standing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, and Mr. Faria, you are up next on the change to the special permit at 464 and 466 Foundry Street.
Thank you. We were before the board last year, about a year ago at this time, we received board approval of the site plan and special permit back in April. And it was for 22 residential units, just about a 50-50 split between one-bedroom and two-bedroom units. In the last 9 months since the project was approved, Mr. Grimaldi, the applicant and owner of the property, has realized that the numbers just don't work with the split of one-bedroom units. The finances just don't work with the added construction costs and interest rates. So we talked of increasing the bedrooms to all two-bedroom units. It's still 22 units as approved, but instead of a mix between ones and twos, they'll all be two-bedroom units. So in doing that, the building had to increase in size a little bit. It's about a 1,700 square foot difference in building area. If you look at my plan, the area highlighted in green is the proposed building, and the area outlined in red is the previously approved building. So you can see it pretty much remains the same. The biggest difference is right here in the front of the building, we have less of a entrance, a lobby. Be an insubstantial change.
Stephanie?
In addition to what Mr. Faria just said, the other thing that made the project uneconomic was front-loading all the affordable units. So working with Mr. Grimaldi, Wayne Beitler, the community planner, we contacted the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Community and came up with a recommendation that the board allow a phasing in of the affordable units. The language that would need to be added to the decision was in your packets. It ensures that, basically what it proposes is that 5 market rate units can be marketed right up front. 2 affordable units must be marketed right up front, and then as the market rate units are sold and become vacant, they become converted to affordable units until all the affordable units have been rented out. There are 6 in total. There's a holdback that after, I think it's 17 have been leased, including the affordable units, that the next market rate unit, if all 6 affordable have not been leased at that point in time, that be the next unit to be leased. And that ensures that all 6 units are leased, all 6 affordable units do get leased in a timely fashion.
So it's just, I mean, it's just really a timing issue.
Yes.
Okay, do you have anything else to add on that
Nothing else,
piece?
sir.
And board members? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the insubstantial change to the decision, including the language. Can I just say the language in the packet?
Mhm.
Wolf?
Second, Sigmund?
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, motion to approve, Stetson, aye.
Sigmund, aye?
Wolf, aye?
Kid, I.
It's
Oh,
here.
Great,
Okay,
motion
thank you.
passes.
Have a
Thank
good night.
you.
Thanks for your time.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'm going to ask for a few minutes to work with Mr. Dugan. We have a technical challenge here.
okay, we'll take just a 5-minute
The
recess.
Video
and-
was working before the meeting and stopped, so
All
we
right.
need to
Okay.
reestablish video connection.
Sure.
Is it because, okay, all right, that was.
Yeah.
It takes a minute.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Is it just because we didn't have it on?
It wasn't on.
Okay.
Yeah, I was,
So that was
I
easy.
can't go much time, I usually
But
get
it
phone.
had to have turned on, because I mean, I tested it.
It was working at a certain point, yeah. I don't know what
I will talk louder. And we'll need people to be quiet to be heard. There are no microphones.
They have like.
No, those,
They can amplify.
those do not, those are for ECAT. Yeah, so again. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was already talking. The only. Okay.
The fence.
Yeah, or you can. Yeah. Oh, no.
Push up again.
I forgot, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's already moved the building.
Look at, that's done so well.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yep.
those are the ones we already have signed. Are these some for the TV, but they can't hear us?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, that was less than 5 minutes, but thank you. So we're back on the record, and now I guess is the moment that everyone here has been waiting for. I'd like to share some introductory comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie for a presentation. And then, I assure you, we are here willing to listen, and we want everyone's opinion. We are going to try to limit as best we can everyone's comments to about 2 minutes each so that we can hear from everyone. Obviously, if there's some back and forth, we'll relax that a little bit, but we really want to focus on new ideas and try not to get into repetition. So in terms of my introductory remarks, from my perspective, Easton is a very special place. And I'm kind of an outsider. I've only lived here for 8 years, but I've been coming here for about 20 when I first met my wife. we have good schools, nice neighborhoods, good youth programs. We have access to Boston and world-class hospitals. We're right down the street from Gillette Stadium and Great Woods. We have open space, we have parks, and we have abundant conservation land. Most importantly, and I think tonight's showing proves this, we have people who care about this community. Everyone up here today, and certainly everyone that's taken the time out of their busy weeks to show up tonight in person, is a testament to that and certainly fits into that category. And one thing that I will say is, as coming from a working class background in Western Mass, one of the first things that stuck out to me about Easton is the fact that there is a community here with community sensibilities. And so I want to start by thanking you all for coming tonight and being part of that community. It's the reason my wife and I are here, and it's certainly the reason why we've decided to raise our children here. So I think one of the main things that I come back to is how do we preserve and maintain that sense of community? And I think on some level, at some point, that is going to require some dedication to ensuring that young families continue to live in this community. And when you look at the median household income of $117,000 here in Easton, and you look at the typical asking prices for single-family homes at this point, regularly exceeding $1 million, the numbers really just don't add up. And on this current pace, we're going to be unable to continue that pipeline of young families and certainly the type of middle class and working class families that have really been the bedrock of this community for generations. So how do we do that? How do we cultivate that community and bring in young families and keep the young families that we have? Well, from a planning perspective, we've considered alternative forms of housing. Some additional density, maybe some more duplexes, maybe some multifamily. Will this look exactly the same as it always has? Probably not. There will probably be some differences. But if we do this the right way, it can certainly be better, and it can certainly help us achieve what I think everyone in this room would like to achieve, which is that sense of community. And I'm confident, again, that that's why everyone is here tonight. So that's the backdrop that I think we as a board have approached zoning in Easton, at least for the past 6 years since I've been here on the board, and probably a lot longer than that. It's certainly the same way that we've approached the MBTA Communities Act. And I think putting aside some of the strong feelings that have arisen out of this act, from my vantage point, this is not a revolutionary law in Easton. And I think there's a reason for that. I think we as a community have taken care to be ahead of the curve in terms of our zoning and becoming more inclusive with our zoning. And we've done that as a group, collectively, as a board in passing bylaws, and at town meeting when all of you have shown up and participated. And we're going to talk about this tonight. While I do think the MBTA Communities Act does require some tweaks and some changes to our zoning laws, I do not think they are the revolutionary changes that some of the other communities in Eastern Massachusetts believe that they are for their communities. So that kind of brings us to where why we're here tonight. The goal here is to finalize a proposal for town meeting, one that promotes our interests in the community that certainly I have foremost in my mind. We are open to everyone's opinions, and we will get to you. I ask for some patience and some understanding in that regard. We're going to start with a presentation from our planning director, and some comments from the select board chair, who the select board has submitted a letter in approval or in support of the zoning changes that have been proposed up to today. And then we're going to open it up to everyone here. And again, I ask for your patience and understanding, but I assure you our goal is to get to everyone. Thank you. Stephanie?
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. So I'm going to start with, a lot of you have probably already heard part of this presentation, but for those who haven't, just go over what the MBTA zone, multifamily by right zoning is, and what it means to Easton. And then we're going to talk a little bit, we've had several meetings. The board has started this hearing process back in September, and folks have been coming from the community to provide feedback, raise their concerns. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those concerns. And then we'll talk about the districts. So first off, this is a zoning mandate. It is not a requirement to build housing. It is simply zoning that would allow certain types of housing to be developed by right if someone wanted to do that with their land, or a developer wanted to build the housing. This zoning was an additional section added to Chapter 40A, which is known as the Zoning Act. And what it does is it requires that communities that are identified as MBTA communities have at least one zoning district in their town that allows multifamily housing by right. This act was enacted into law as part of the economic development bill that was passed in 2021. The reason it's part of the economic development bill is because there is a housing crisis in Massachusetts. Bob just talked about the challenges for people trying to come into Easton, find housing. People who want to live here, people who want to stay here. It becomes more challenging every day. And the state is finding that people are starting to move out of the state because they can't afford to stay here. We're having more difficulty attracting new people to the state, and that means that businesses can't find people to employ to keep their businesses running. So there's an economic factor in not having enough housing for everyone. Again, what it's intended to do is to reduce local zoning barriers to multifamily housing, and it is a zoning mandate. The requirements are, again, if you're an MBTA community, and an MBTA community is a community that either hosts an MBTA transit station within its bounds, or it abuts towns that host MBTA transit stations. And Easton does not have a transit station, we know that. However, Stoughton, Brockton, and Mansfield, who are all immediate abutters to the town, do have MBTA stations. So being an MBTA adjacent community, Easton needs to have a zoning district, a minimum of 50 acres in total, that allows multifamily housing by right. It can be comprised of separate sub-districts, as long as at least one of those sub-districts is 25 acres, contiguous acres in total, and none of the other sub-districts are less than 5 contiguous acres in total. It must allow the capability of housing being built at 15 units per acre. And in total, it must accommodate, so across the district, in total, it must be able to accommodate 10% of the town's permanent housing stock. And that number in Easton, the 10% number, is 913 units. And again, that's across the entire district. So Bob talked a lot, and maybe not deliberately, but about why the town is moving forward with the state mandate, and has been since the guidelines were first issued in draft form in 2022. Easton has been taking a very proactive view of the requirement and working hard because it will increase diverse housing options that have been a long-standing priority for the town. It supports Easton's proactive planning for mixed income, mixed-use development, and defined target growth areas. And we're proposing districts that are consistent with Easton's planning priorities to increase housing and commercial development opportunities where Easton has and continues to make investments in infrastructure investments. So it also supports Easton's economic development and housing goals. And I think these three questions really highlight what those goals are. Bob mentioned, he talked about attracting young people to the town to help keep the town young. You want people to come in, fresh blood, as people age. But at the same time, you want to be able to let the people who have lived here for a number of years and made this their community and their home to be able to age here. And they need to be able to answer the question that as they age, can I stay in this community that I have built around myself? And then anybody at any point in time can face a change in life circumstances that have them questioning, gee, can I still afford to live in Easton and stay here amongst my friends? Now, the reason the town is complying, the law requires that MBTA communities adopt a compliant multifamily zoning district. The district attorney issued an advisory last year that stated that it's a law, it's a requirement. There's no waiver option. You can't opt out. And from the time that the guidelines were issued, it was made clear that towns would be ineligible for certain funding grants. And Easton has benefited from several of those. The MassWorks program, which has helped pay for a lot of the infrastructure in town, that has helped improve and revitalize areas like the downtown area, the Five Corners district, and also parts of Queeset, the Queeset Commercial District. So again, throughout this process, there's been a lot of feedback from the residents, from the folks who live in proximity to the proposed districts. We've heard a lot of questions. One that we've heard is multifamily housing. Is that going to affect my property values? And again, Bob referenced and talked about the cost of housing in Easton and how homes are hitting the $1 million mark. And what we can see is that since 2019, the property values in Easton have increased by 31% over time. During that period of time, so just prior to 2019, you had Avalon come on board in 2017, 344 units of multifamily housing. Before that, there was Queeset Commons, and there was the property on Washington Street with multifamily housing. Those all came online and are all being rented, and yet the housing values in Easton continue to increase. Another question, what happens to the current uses when the districts are adopted? So the state did not dictate exactly how you establish your zoning district. You could either change the underlying zoning to add the multifamily zoning, or you could make it an overlay district. In Easton, the decision was to make it an overlay district. And what that means is that a developer can come in and he can take advantage of the multifamily zoning district for development, or she could use the underlying zoning. The underlying zoning doesn't go away. It doesn't change because the town adopts the overlay district. It doesn't make any of the existing uses non-conforming. There's sufficient sewer capacity in the two districts, the proposed districts, that the zoning is being proposed for. The Eastman Foundry area has plenty of capacity, even taking into consideration the folks that are, they've been paying their betterment fee but haven't tied in yet. The town reserves that capacity and does not sell that to anyone else. There's plenty of room for additional growth, as well as in the Precinct Commercial District. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the zones. We hear a lot and we recognize that people are concerned that this housing is going to create additional traffic and exacerbate traffic problems, particularly along Route 106. I think most of you may know, but I'm happy if you don't to let you know that there is a project that the town is working on for roadway improvements to Foundry Street. We're in the early design phases, and the plans are to add sidewalks, add a multi-purpose path, and to provide traffic management improvements to the road to make traffic flow smoother and make it easier for people to get out of their homes and take turns. Part of that effort includes a light that will be going in at Pequannock Avenue as part of the sawmill project. We expect that to be completed in the springtime. The improvements with the traffic improvements will be signaling that will help flow traffic, and the design phase does take into consideration future growth within the district, so to accommodate what anticipated future traffic patterns are in the future. We're in the early design phase. It's an 8 to 10 year project, but before you know it, it will be done and completed. Also, we've heard people concerned about crashes, and looking at the crash data that was provided by the fire department and the police department. If you look at the 5 years pre-Avalon coming online and post coming online, the traffic crashes that occur along Foundry Street are pretty stable. I mean, there are crashes, they do occur, but we did not see a significant increase as a result of Avalon. There's a concern that the Eastman Foundry district, which is proposed around Robert Drive, is too large, that it will be too dense, and it will add too many vehicles to 106 and further exacerbate the problem. The planning board initially was considering, and I don't think you can see my cursor, but on the left was the proposal that the board was considering at the beginning of the discussion. It was actually a little bit larger and included properties on the south side of Foundry Street. So you can see that reflects Foundry Street, which would run along the bottom of the shaded areas, and then Robert Drive runs up through that. Avalon is on the top side, the north side, and then you have the Target and the shopping plaza. So again, right out of the gates, the board said, you know, we think it's too much with the properties on the south side. They took those out of the district, and then in response to concerns from residents in the Furnace Village district, took out the Target property and the shopping plaza. New multifamily development will bring more children into the school systems. New housing will bring children into the school systems, and certainly multifamily housing will at the same time. The pie chart shows what percentage or number of school-age children that were enrolled at the beginning of this school year were housed in multifamily housing. The remainder, the large blue area of the pie, represents children who come from single-family homes. So again, the majority of the students in the school system still come from single-family homes. Also, in 2017, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council did a study statewide to determine the impact of housing growth on school enrollment. And what they found is essentially that in cities that had rapid housing production, the enrollment barely changed. In districts that saw large housing, it still was a very small number, and in a lot of cases, the numbers of enrollment were still dropping. There seems to be more apartments being built in Easton than single-family homes. Certainly over the last 12 years, with Avalon coming on board, with the apartments at Queeset Commons and on Washington Street, there's more multifamily housing that's occurred in Easton than probably has over a 20-year period. It still only represents 12% of the housing stock, which is primarily single-family housing. And that gets us to the districts. So, do you want me to walk through the districts, or?
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
Okay. So again, this is the current version of the Easton Boundary District. And I'm going to stand up. I find it easier to do this when I can point to the screen, and the laser pointers don't seem to work well on these. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is Eastman Street.
Could you speak up a bit, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
this is Eastman Street. I'm trying to talk as loud as I can. This is Robert Drive. And again, you have the Avalon development. This is an existing warehouse. It was a manufacturing facility for a number of years. And then you have some smaller parcels here. This comprises 41 acres in total. And it was selected. I'm going to step back a minute because I didn't mention why, how the different areas were selected as potential districts. So if you're an MBTA community that hosts a transit station, you have to have your district within a half mile of that transit station. Because Easton doesn't, and we're an adjacent community, the advisory from Housing and Livable Communities was that you locate your districts where there are neighborhoods, there's proximity to businesses and services that people can take advantage of that might be walkable neighborhoods. That all fit in with the long-term planning that Easton has undertaken in all the time that I have worked for the town of Easton, which is going on 17 years. That has been the plan. That's what Easton has talked about doing. So in citing these locations, when the planning, the select board appointed early on an implementation review team to review the guidelines and provide comments back to the state, but also to start looking at those districts, that became one of their guiding principles about where these districts should be located. And this was an area that, again, it's close to all aspects of shopping, food, clothing, some level of furniture. There are businesses, and it's walkable within that area. Robert Drive has sidewalks that are completely walkable. And once the sidewalks come with the Foundry Street improvements, there'll be easy access to conservation area for recreation opportunities. So it provides all those opportunities, including potential work opportunities. And this area in particular met all those criteria to a high degree.
Stephanie, can you sit on the, use your remote, sorry, the remote that's in front of you, not on the computer.
I'm trying to get,
Just use the arrow to put left, press left and then OK.
press left.
Yep, and then hit OK.
Okay. Now I have to start again, okay. And then I can just use this to advance?
No.
Oh.
No, that was separate issues.
Because you can see I have a problem with the arrows. Okay. The next district is Belmont Washington Street. So this is on the southeast corner of the intersection of Belmont and Washington Street. You probably recognize the marketplace. This is kind of an interesting building. And then you head up here. This is Belmont Arms right there. And that is an existing multifamily complex. The larger of the buildings houses about 30 units of apartments, and the smaller one about 15. When I talked about all the advantages of the location of Foundry Eastman, this has similar close proximity to businesses and services. You have the industrial park right here, so there are work opportunities for anyone who would live in this area. It also is close to Route 24. The Eastman Foundry Street has close proximity to 495, Route 90, Route 140, and also the Mansfield Transit Station. This is in about 4 miles from the Brockton MBTA Transit Station. And then we have North Washington, and this is the Target Plaza. And
Roach Brothers.
Roach Brothers. You would think I'd know this by now, right? So this is Roach Brothers. Again, not quite as much commercial business activity going on there. When I talked about Belmont Street, one thing I failed to mention, so I mentioned Eastman Foundry was close proximity to some of the town's really prime conservation land. Belmont Washington Street doesn't have that luxury, but it's across the street from Stonehill College, which has a beautiful campus, much of it forested with beautiful pathways, and they encourage people to go walk, so there's passive recreation for anyone who would live in that district. This, not so much, but again, it is centered around some businesses, and it is right next to the Stoughton border. Easy access to the Stoughton train station, and also Route 24 and 138.
Stephanie, can you just, for the Foundry, you put the size of the acreage. Can you say the acreage for the Belmont and for the Roach Brothers?
The Belmont was 20 acres, and this is 33. So those are the districts.
All right, well, thank you, Stephanie. I think at this point, we're gonna start opening up for comment. Before we open it up to the public, I did mention the letter that we received from the select board. The chair is here today, and I would like for her, if she doesn't mind, to present the letter to the group.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dottie Fultonetti. I'm chair of the select board, and I just want to recognize my other select board member, Jamie Stebbins, in the back corner. So last night, the select board voted to submit this letter supporting the MBTA plans that the planning board has done. It's long. I'm not going to read all of it because I know we want to get to the questions, but I do want to mention a couple of things in here that I think are really important. So, hold on one second. Our director of public services demonstrated the impact of the regional housing crisis on residents, and she gave us her name is Tracy Levine, and she gave us these statistics. 69% since March of 2022, all residents who have sought deputy director Levine's services, 42% were seeking support with housing, which typically revolved around affordability. Of those residents seeking housing support, 69% were over 60 years of age, 14% met the standard to be classified as homeless, 7% were priced out of their homes due to rent increases and secured other affordable housing in Easton, 21% were priced out of their homes due to rent increases and secured housing in more affordable towns, having to leave their home in Easton. 33% were on a fixed budget, anticipated rent increases, and made the decision to apply for affordable and subsidized housing. And 23% are continuing to struggle to make rent payments and also seek financial relief in other areas, such as applying for SNAP and fuel assistance. The numbers tell a story of the housing crisis on their own, but more impactful is the actual lived experience of some of our residents. I'd like to share Carmen's name. The name's protected for her privacy. Her story highlights her family's descent into homelessness. Carmen moved to Easton seeking good schools that would meet the needs of 2 of her 3 children living with disabilities and for a safe community. Carmen is a hardworking single mother who came face to face with the housing crisis that no one should have to experience. She works for a neighboring municipality and is paid a moderate income. Even so, she was spending more than 50% of her income on housing costs and had never fallen behind on her rent. When Carmen received her rent renewal intent by the mail, the monthly rent was unaffordable of an increase of 30%. For her, this equated to an extra $900 that she'd have to pay towards rent to stay in her apartment. It was at this point that she connected with Tracy. She talked about the financial pressure that she was feeling and the panic of having to potentially move her children, who were thriving in the Easton public school system, to another town. She was assisted with exhaustive housing search and came up with a list of Easton apartment complexes which offered affordable housing to apply to. The waiting lists were too long, and therefore the probability that an apartment would become available before it was time to sign a new lease with her current landlord was close to 0. Additionally, she applied for RAFT, which provided funding as a temporary tool to stay in her apartment a couple months longer. Once RAFT was exhausted, it became inevitable that she and her children would lose their home. Subsequently, Carmen and her 3 children were evicted from the apartment and her belongings were put into storage. The last time they spoke, Carmen informed her she was able to rely on the kindness of a friend in a nearby community to provide a place for her to sleep at night, and her 3 children were divided amongst family members in different towns. Carmen worries about the traumatic impact this eviction and divide within her family will have on her children's mental health. Currently, there is no legislation to protect renters from being homeless due to exorbitant rent increases. Our board has heard this, not just from this really sad story, but from many older people. You can talk to people in all the rentals that we had, and a 30% increase is really nothing that's unheard of. There's some more statistics that we wanted to mention to contextualize our assessment of Easton's history, particularly its recent history, demonstrating that our efforts to promote affordable and diverse housing have been key to the town's continued vibrancy and health across many areas, and have not come at the expense of preservation of our environment, history, or open space. 66 new, expanded, or upgraded local businesses from 2012 to 2022 bring $86 million of property valuation to Easton and contribute to local jobs. 11 businesses opened or expanded in 2023. Easton's housing stock rose by 13% from approximately 8,100 to 9,100 units, with less than 70% of these units originating from multifamily rentals, with the remainder being single family. Despite this, single-family detached homes still make up more than 4 of the 5 total homes in Easton. Avalon Easton becomes the single largest taxpayer, with new growth of nearly $1 million for one project. Families are diversifying, with students of color in the Easton Public Schools growing from 11 to 26% of the school population since 2007. Easton's local reserves have grown, maintained strong bond ratings and quality public services without an operating override since 2007, and Easton's open space preservation has expanded with the addition of one of the largest permanent preserved spaces, 524 Depot Street. You saw some of, so one of the questions is, if we don't do this, what happens? Stephanie mentioned this in her presentation. I'm not gonna go through the numbers again, but it's millions of dollars of grants that we've gotten. So you say, so what, we don't need any more money, right? How much money was that really? Translating that conversation, not into the dollars and cents, but what did that dollars and cents provide for our community? So if you've lived long enough to know before the Farmer's Daughter was there what Main Street was, we got $1.5 million to beautify, to put in sidewalks, new lighting. We wouldn't have the Farmer's Daughter if it wasn't for housing and for those grants. The shovel works overbuilt the wastewater treatment capacity so that they could bring sewer to the downtown, and that catalyzed that whole neighborhood. So these are some of the things, if you look at where this money was invested, think about it, what Easton would look like if we didn't have those investments. The other thing that I just wanted to comment on is a lot of people I see on the internet, or even as recently as in the news with Milton, say, well, we're gonna fight the state, we're just not gonna do it. This is a law, it's not a suggestion, you know, we have to follow the law. And when the select board takes its oath, any elected official, every appointed official, we have to take an oath to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it is very serious. The Attorney General's office is gonna take legal action as a steward of taxpayer dollars. I know that myself and our other select board members would not be in favor of using tax dollars to put into a lawsuit to fight the state over something that we're just not gonna win. So I really commend the planning board who's been working on this for well over a year. They've come up with a very thoughtful plan that meets the criteria, that really doesn't have the impact that some of the things that I've seen on social media, I hope get dispelled tonight and that you ask those questions. They've been to about 25 community events now to try to find the information that people want. They've modified these plans based on what they've heard, and I think you guys have done a really great job, and I appreciate all the work that you've done. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, we're going to open it up for comment. Please, it's going to be hard for me to keep track of everyone who's spoken, so we're sort of on the honor system. But if you guys could just raise your hands, I'll call on everybody one by one. Yes, sir. If you could please just stand up and introduce yourself. And
Tim Duffy, 19 Gawain Road. I haven't been to any other meetings, so I apologize if I'm getting into things that have already been covered. Back when Avalon came online, I know it's a separate statute, but we complied with the minimum requirements of 40B, so the town could deny a 40B project if they saw fit to do so. In looking at this, I see that there can't be any limitation on unit size. It has to be a minimum of 15 units per acre, age, etc. Is there something about affordable housing in this as well that's going to help us with that, the 40B issues?
Yes.
And bringing that housing into play?
Tim, thank you for asking that, and this is probably the first presentation I've done that I haven't mentioned the affordability requirement. Initially, the state wasn't going to allow communities to require an affordability percentage. And based on the feedback that they received from the communities, and in our case, it was the implementation team that put those together, and we worked on that and made sure that the affordability was an issue. They changed that rule and allow communities to require up to 10% of the units that be built be affordable. And that, in part, is to ensure that there are affordable units that are coming online, but also to help ensure that we continue to meet the 10%, which the town was at. But as you build new housing, if you don't keep a stride of that number, and at this point it's around 9.5%.
Thank you.
thank you. Yes,
I'm gonna come up here.
please.
Denise Higgins, 4 New Pond Way. Louder, please. When I hear this, for the last 38 years, my career, my passion, my devotion, my concern has been housing. When I hear what we're talking about, the one thing that resonates is what Rob said, and he said, if we do this the right way. The mandate is coming from the state, and it's a one-size-fits-all, and it doesn't necessarily fit every community. If we were able to do this at a local level, I think all of us here would understand we have a housing need. Everyone here has someone that wants to either live in the community until we choose not to. In my case, I actually have one child who has a PhD, and he's concerned about being able to live in the community. That's a sad fact. That's truly sad. I'm not sure that this MBTA mandate that we have, and by the way, I'm not here to fight it. I'm here to live with it. Let's live with it. I'm not sure that it does exactly what we want it to do. Because apartments don't equate house and home. It provides a place for you to reside. The very reason why Dottie read this letter is because that person was facing housing insecurity. Housing insecurity is the rental rate that has become so absurd for some people that they can no longer reside. What are these new buildings that we're building here going to be? Are they going to be the single-family homes that people want to buy and to live in and to join, as most of us have, in home ownership? Or are they going to be bigger apartment units, new stainless steel appliances and beautiful countertops, and the ability for the owner to charge those rents that are no longer affordable? I'm not going to fight this. What I think we need to do is, we don't need to be a Milton. We need to come together and we need to decide that we need to do it. But I think that what my platform here is to say to you is, let's get in, let's give the state what they want. They're looking for 913 units from us. There were algorithms and there were other services that the state provided for us to come up with exactly and entirely how many units would be benefited or would be resulting from the parcels that we put forth. I am not in favor of us granting the state 1,393 units when we are asked to provide 913.
Thank you.
I therefore would like to amend and ask our town to modify the Eastman Foundry District. Instead of providing 41 acres, to reduce it to 20 acres, which is Avalon. And Avalon is a really darn good thing to leave in this plan. It gives us the benefit. So let's not fight that anymore. Let's leave Avalon in and take out the other ones there in an effort to give the state only what the state needs to do. And what we should be doing is bringing it home and letting us do it on our own home turf, our way, to provide it to the citizens of the town of Easton. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to the next person, I have a number of email submissions that I do need to get into the record tonight, so I'll kind of intersperse them between comments, so just bear with me, apologies. This one is from Andrew Miller at 42 Welch Road. I would like to make a comment on the proposed MBTA zoning ordinance. As a resident of Easton for the past 3 years and a member of the Affordable Housing Trust in town, I find it imperative to comply with the proposal for the MBTA zoning communities. I see great value in the town of Easton in allowing for the opportunity to increase the availability for housing, especially for families here in Easton, is paramount for any thriving city or town. This new zoning ordinance will make it financially feasible for developers to add affordable and competitively priced housing in areas of town that already have the space and need for development. If Easton is to remain competitive and grow as a community, we must adhere to this new zoning ordinance. I'll just do one at a time so you don't have to listen to my voice the whole time. So I'm sorry, please, next person. Yes, sir.
John Morgan, Shagbark. Shagbark Road is off of Foundry Street. A question and a comment, if I may. 50 acres yields about 725 housing units at that rate. We're being asked, it sounds like, to produce a whole lot more than that. My concern, or my question followed by my concern, is that if we add 700 and 900 units, if the mandate is 10% of housing, does that number grow as the mandate necessitates a 10% increase?
Okay, so you came up with a yield of 725. The algorithm that the state has provided us to use extracts land that is either restricted or takes into consideration parking areas and that type of thing. So the area you're talking about would yield around 607 units based on that calculation. And so that was a question that was raised during the comment period and shortly after the Housing and Livable Communities issued the second draft of the guidelines. And the state has assured us that they are not going to keep increasing the 10% number.
Okay, so we'll hit that number, it'll be a threshold that we don't need to crest.
Right, but remember, when you say hit the threshold, this is not a mandate to build. It is just a requirement that you have a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right, that allows up to 15 units per acre if a developer or a property owner wanted to build that number of units, and across the district could accommodate 913 units.
Thank you. And now for my concern. My concern is that this disproportionately affects that Eastman district. You mentioned that improvements to 106 would take 8 to 10 years to develop. It will not take 8 to 10 years for developers to build the housing that we're being discussed here. The output of that is that 106 will have a disproportionate negative impact from traffic flow, congestion, and risk of accident and harm, as that will not be taking place in time for the development to be safely impacting the community.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make one brief. So very briefly, again, you'll recall that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that this is an overlay district and that there's existing development already there. There are only, I think, 2 parcels that are undeveloped. So any development in that district would require redevelopment, and that would take 8 to 10 years and probably not even be built to the full capacity.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes.
Hi, bear with me, I'm not great at public speaking. Mary Landry, 15 Paquonicket. I've been watching this for a while, and I have more questions. I understand I'm in support of this MBTA voting positive for it. I'm curious to know, I have a problem with including anything in the Eastman Foundry District outside of Avalon. So I want to know what the current zoning is allowed for those other parcels that are currently included to make it 41 acres.
I mean, this kind of goes back to one of the primary comments that I shared at the outset in my intro, quite frankly. And to Stephanie's point, when we first looked at this as a board, way back when, we were trying to look at, well, we want to comply because we have to, but we also want to do it in a way that's not going to be terribly impactful on the community. Foundry Eastman made sense for all of those reasons because we could have complied with the MBTA Communities Act just by basically putting this overlay district on top of the zoning district that's already there, which would allow for far more development than we're talking about in that area under this current zoning proposal. So,
I understand.
So to answer your question directly, based on current zoning, and granted, the zoning allows for that type of development by special permit as opposed to by right.
I
It's
thought
just
so.
a
Go
slight
on.
difference.
Yeah.
But the density that is currently allowed in that area would far surpass anything that we're talking about here. In
At
terms
what?
of-
So we all have like 15 units per acre in our minds. That's ingrained. What are you talking about is potentially possible so that we can have apples to apples understanding of what is possible in the 35 Eastman and the 5 narrow lots?
So in that area,
Yeah.
it's I believe it's 1 unit per 2,500 square feet.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, we're talking about with a maximum of 20 units. So the change in the bylaw is, and especially, so if you were, and I think we have, if you
Do you
want,
want me to
can
show
you
it?
pull up the slide?
Yeah.
Because I think this is actually a really important point
Yeah.
for us to convey. It's a really, really good question. If you look at what's permissible now in that district, we have the numbers up there. That entire district, if you look on the top left, could potentially yield 2,300 units. okay? That's under current zoning that was vetted by this entire community and passed years ago.
31 acres,
Yes.
including Avalon.
That includes Target and the shopping plaza and
It's
Avalon.
more than 30 acres, that's 31.8
Units per acre.
units per acre.
Okay.
So if you go down, to try to get to your apples to apples question,
Yeah.
if you go down, if you exclude Target and the shopping plaza, which is what, based on a lot of the feedback we're sort of at right now,
Yeah.
that's a yield of over 1,200 units. Now, if you go up to the top right, that's where we're at just currently in the state of the proposal as it exists, as of the last meeting, 607 units.
Okay, I
by
want to drill
right.
down into that further.
Yes.
please. Okay.
So the point I'm trying to make is that the change here is in my opinion, a very modest one, in the sense of you're allowing a very small percentage of what's already allowable in that area. You're just changing it to by right. So what does that mean in practical terms? For a developer, is going for a special permit going to be that different than going for by right? Maybe a little. I don't think it's going to add an awful lot of cost to their bottom line. You might see some delay, but quite frankly, we as a group and in Easton, we don't see an awful lot of challenges to special permits. So this isn't like in Boston where everything's done by variance and you have neighbors that are, well-financed and challenging every project that comes along, where you're talking about year-plus delays in development because of neighbor opposition. We have a pretty responsive group of developers and of people in this community that when there are issues with a development, they raise them. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference in the costs added to this area by complying with the zoning. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and maybe this is a point that Stephanie made more eloquently than I could, I don't think we're going to see an awful lot of change from what we already have seen in this area. If the density was going to be so appealing to developers to come in and revamp that whole area, I think we would have caught some murmurs of that already. And I just don't think it's changing the value of the property to such an extent that we're going to see that. We might see some, maybe the word gets out that now it's by right and it's versus special permit. Maybe you see some additional interest, but I just don't think it changes the finances for a developer to such an extent where we're going to see a dramatic change from what we already have on the books.
Okay, if I may now. This 607 is at 15 units per acre?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And mixed use is going to be at 25 per acre.
That's if they propose building the mixed use, the retail or other business, commercial
Okay.
business.
And you heard tonight, Mr. Grimaldi increasing his number of bedrooms because it wasn't viable for him. He's not here anymore, whoever was this, because his original plans were not viable financially, and they had to come back to the board to increase the number of bedrooms. Under our current zoning law, how many bedrooms are allowed?
There's not a restriction on bedrooms in the East.
But there's no
Not.
restriction on the mass, on the MBTA overlay either. My concern is that we're all talking and
True.
doing our own little calculation at 15 units an acre and what's that gonna impact us? Nobody's looking at 25 units per acre. We all want mixed use. So my question is, if the overlay district were put into place and mixed use, sorry, I'll tone it down.
Take your time.
If the overlay district were put into place and mixed use is a desirable goal, but a developer said it doesn't make financial sense to do it with 15 units per acre, would this board then recommend to increase the number of units to 25 per acre? Or would you keep it only residential at 15 per acre?
Well, so in that instance, I mean, it really becomes one of two things. They've either got to come to us for a special permit, or under the current existing zoning, or they've got to go for a variance based on the by right overlay. They would have to seek some sort of a variance. So,
Well, I think what Mary's asking is, gee, if I think I can't make it affordable at 15 units per acre, I'll go for the commercial
Mhm.
and add the commercial and get 25 units.
But the group also wants mixed use. So would the board then
Well,
want to favor mixed use and then therefore a more dense
so
offering?
what's being proposed is the mixed use would be as of right also. You wouldn't
Right.
need a special permit. And what the town's finding, and this is, again, I talked to my, my peers about this, how are you attracting commercial to
Mhm.
your businesses without housing? And they can't. Nobody can. It just doesn't work. So if someone wants to do commercial, they could do it and take advantage, and they might do 25 units per acre, they might not.
Right.
But that was to give an incentive to make it economic, to be able to do commercial.
So
in
when
the
we're all
mixed
doing
use.
our math, we're thinking 15 units. The difference between 15 and 25 units is an additional 66%.
But I think what Bob was pointing out under the existing zoning, you could do that.
With special permit, and that's the point. If we put in an MBTA, they have the right to do that. If we keep that little portion out of easement boundary, we have the right to grant it or not. It's a more thoughtful approach. We still want affordable housing or mixed-use housing. We want the business opportunities. We can still have that without including the rest of that district. We already meet compliance if we just do Avalon and the other two districts as they're opposed. That yields 1,126 units.
So just as a follow-up, just so I can kind of understand the sentiment, is the sentiment that you would prefer not to see the mixed use incentive in this area?
No, we want mixed use.
Right.
And we're not opposed to additional housing beyond what this MBTA state mandate is making us do. But we want it done thoughtfully for everyone's concern. That includes the town's concerns, that includes the housing prices. We don't want everything jammed in there, forced by right. We can get single family or duplexes and more into that area without making us go with 3, 4, 5-story buildings at this high density. We can still make this work in a very thoughtful way.
So your idea is to remove the
Avalon.
mixed use piece?
No, we still want an overall goal of mixed use as a community,
Right.
as developed.
But from the by right proposal, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
What
You
you
guys
would
tell
feel,
me.
and well,
This is beyond
I'm
me.
hearing a lot of claps, so I'm assuming there's agreement here.
We want the city to control the decision if we want to give them a special permit and not be forced by participating in the.
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is that if there were to be a change to the existing proposal, it would be to remove the mixed-use incentive from the by right aspect of the proposal.
But if you say that, then we're still exposed to 15 units per acre over 12 and 9, 21 acres.
So I think what I'm hearing is that you're opposed to the by right aspect.
We're opposed to the
Ultimately.
MBTA provisions or whatever on those parcels of land.
She's talking about the
We
extra
still
lots.
have that possibility.
Those extra lots that were added on, she just wants those moved back over to Easton's control. Like, the control is a bad word, but whoever was up here earlier was talking about the number of acres.
Here, why don't you stand up? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please,
Apologies,
please state your name as well.
Josh, Gilmore Road. From what I understand, the first woman came up, she was talking about, you're going overboard. We only need 913 units. Reduce the acreage to get us to 913 as opposed to the number you're at. She has, I forget what property you were even talking about, my apologies, but it has additional lots there where you could reduce the acreage, and that moves it back to the existing zoning where there needs to be a special permit, and then you keep the proposed zoning, go with the MBTA, just don't make as much acreage as you're proposing to the MBTA. Does that sound Robert?
We wanna remove 35
Bob,
Eastman
But-
and the
If
fingers.
this gentleman could state his last name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Josh, could you state your last name?
First.
Josh first?
Yep.
Great. We're gonna
Maria
try to keep
Wilson.
this orderly so we can get everybody
Sure.
on the record.
Maria Wilson, 16 South Street. What we want to see is we want to remove 35 Eastman and the fingers from that district. We don't need it to make our numbers for the state mandate. And in doing so, we then, as a town, can come back and do what we want to do and not what we're mandated to do.
She wants you.
I mean, I don't think we can remove the fingers and have something that's compliant.
Yes, you can.
Why not?
Yeah, well,
Because we don't meet the
We wouldn't meet it.
I don't think we'd meet the total.
well, there's a way you can do it.
Please, stand up.
Scott
State your name.
Tyson, 93 Kevin's Way. Stephanie, can you bring up those maps again? Starting with the, yeah, this one here. So, yeah, Foundry Eastman. So we're talking about like this big chunk here, I guess.
Yeah?
Yes.
21
Okay.
acres.
And you want to get rid of that. Well, I think you said we have to have a total of 50 acres, and one of them has to be 25. Well, we got the 41 there. You rip that out, it's gone. So can we go to the next screen? Thank you. Since you're throwing companies under the bus, and we threw the warehouse under the bus, and also, we just have to have districts that we give to the state to say, okay, these are the districts that we can have. Why don't we throw them under the bus instead of the other one? You have plenty of acreage there. It's all one big spot now, and you meet the 25
So the
acres.
intent is not to encourage development. The intent is just to comply.
Right.
On paper.
Understood, yeah, you just have to comply that you have the land available if somebody wants to come in. Well, say this business, which was like IBC or something like that, say they sell to a developer, you've got probably another 15 acres, you have your minimum of 25 in one area, and you can take out the other one that's on Foundry and Eastman and cut down the traffic. I'm on Kevin's Way, which is way down 106, and there's some mornings everybody comes from Target, and then just as that clears, everybody comes from Mansfield, and by the time that clears, everybody's coming from Target in. I can't imagine the people that live down in the townhouses near Five Corners. And you're talking about improvements to 106, that all I heard were sidewalks, and I didn't grow up in Boston or Massachusetts, so I don't drive on sidewalks, so maybe they do here. I'm not sure what that's going to involve. And that's going to be a waste on the road, but like I said, you're just taking, you have to have the land, and you're just taking certain lots. Why don't you include that lot and take the ones out from Foundry and Easton?
But we already have the numbers, I'm sorry. You have 33 acres in North Washington.
Excuse me, we gave you a lot more than 2 minutes.
Well,
Let's let him speak.
Sorry, we
Quickly.
already have the
And-
numbers without
And
disrupting all the
you have
maps.
plenty of, roads going this way. Down Belmont Street, you're down to Route 24 in no time, and it's just gonna create, if somebody comes in, you're gonna put a lot of traffic down in Target that's already there. And I don't see why this can't be swapped for the other one. That's just my question.
All right, thank you. I will come back to you all. I'm just gonna read another email submission. Robert Peoples, 125 Norton Ave. I read up on this issue and there seems to be some disconnects between stated goals and reality. Increasing the population density in Southeaston without providing convenient public transportation will just increase the number of cars on the road and will require better roads to handle the volume. So much for improving climate change. The probability of getting sufficient ridership to justify efficient train or bus service is pretty low. Maybe a survey of current residents of condos and apartments here to see who is willing to give up their cars would be instructive. Good luck. I had the pleasure of living in Tokyo, which was leveled by Allied firebombing during World War II and was rebuilt around an excellent train system designed like spokes of a wheel. The city grew up around the tracks, as did industry, so people could go to work, school, and shopping using the trains, which ran every 10 minutes. The only problem was going from one spoke to another. which required a long ride into the hub to change direction. Other small cities in Japan relied on bus service. If you live in Danchi apartment building, merchants would show up once a day in trucks to sell you food at highly inflated prices. I also lived in Italy. We're gonna skip that. Just, there's a comment about Henry Ford. Forgive me, we're just trying to, digging deeper, it seems the issue is not really about efficient transportation, but about some concept of housing affordability. The most affordable housing in Easton was to be found at the trailer parks, and the town got involved in that debacle. Probably an excellent example of having government try to solve an economic problem by fiat. We have to go back and ask, is this actually a problem that we either can or should address, and if so, at what level of burden to the existing infrastructure? Personally, I'm not convinced it should be our problem. I don't know if this is Italian, but cui bono. Ciao, okay. All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Dale Carrister, 21 South Street. I want to thank you all because you've been indulging me all along, as you're all too ready aware. I've been on top of this issue for a long time, and I appreciate how much time you give me in prior meetings. I've been focused on this issue for the last 6 or 7 months, even before the Planning and Zoning Board got involved in it. So, thank you for that. And frankly, the reason I got involved, and frankly, a lot of the folks are here, is that initially this district was 95 acres. And I've been told not to use the word "it's not fair." Well, frankly, I didn't think it was fair. And I wouldn't advocate that for our area. I wouldn't advocate it for North Washington Street. I wouldn't advocate it for Belmont Street. We're in this together as one town. And I've been always advocating in favor of having it split amongst multiple districts, and thank you for doing that. I definitely appreciate that. There are going to be some at town meeting, I think, who are going to be against this. There is a strong undercurrent in town or anti-apartment. I'm not one of them. As you all know from what I've discussed before, I had to go through and going through a divorce, living in a variety of things. There's not a lot of diversity of housing in Easton. And I lived in 5 different places in 7 years. I know those challenges myself personally. And I voted in favor and spoke in favor at town meeting of some of the additional density. And by the way, I think for that foundry, I think if I'm not mistaken, it is 1 per 2,500 square feet, but it's also, which is like 17.2 per acre. But it's also, I believe, limited to 20 per lot, if I'm not mistaken, as it currently exists, as I read it.
I thought it was per developer.
The minimum, it's per lot, and the minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet. So
Right.
it could be, the numbers were based on what could be, just like the MBTA zoning, on what could be.
Right, let me just finish though, because my point on this is that with the existing zoning on it, when you have a 12-acre lot, it's not going to be, 17.2 per every one of those acres. It currently is limited, and I've heard.
Unless someone could subdivide it.
If approved, right? But, and as it currently stands now, the Planning and Zoning Board has a lot of control in terms of exercising special permits, which is, I think, a theme that you've heard
So
far.
again,
Seth, can I
Dale,
just finish, please? You guys have all had a lot of time. I'd really like to just finish what I have first, and then happy to respond. As I was mentioning, I'm not one of those folks opposed to this. I'm in favor of this. I recognize the value of what we've received in terms of some of those state grants, including the $1.5 million that was applied towards the construction project to reduce the sewer betterment. Most of the folks in this room have paid anywhere from $14,000 to nearly $20,000 have been assessed for betterment. The folks in this room have supported the economic development of the town through that. And I would also note, the folks in this room have fully supported multifamily housing in town. You mentioned before, by your figures, I think you said there's about 1,000 of the multifamily units in town. We're over 550 of them in our area, and most of our members live in Gaslight and in Lamplighter and Greenwood and so forth. And so these folks are supportive of that, but this has to be done the right way. And my advice to the board on this is you have a choice, which is we can comply, or we can try to do something, in my view, overreaching and do more than comply. And I think that's what's happened here. We have a current proposal of 94 acres when we only need 50, and we have a current proposal for nearly 1,400 units when we only need the 913. And as Mary was pointing out, I read through the proposed zoning that was submitted to the state in November, and that provided that there is a bonus for multi-use, which allow for a 5-story apartment building if you do multi-use with commercial on the first floor, which I think would be great, but then you have 5 stories with 25 units per acre. So when we're talking about for the district, for our district in the Foundry area of 607 units, which is what I think is being referenced now, it actually could be up to over 1,000 if it's 25 units. And I personally have the belief, like the movie Field of Dreams, if you rezone it, they will build it, because the developers are out there are gonna try to maximize profits. That's their interest. And I don't think the interest of the developers should be guiding this type of a public policy decision. So I would identify the issues as follows. How do you maximize the likelihood that this passes a town meeting? Second, how much property do we designate for a loss of that kind of local control with a special permit control that the Planning and Zoning Board currently has? Third, what do we do and how much more commercial property are we willing to lose? And then fourth, do we take into account that the impact that these changes have on the surrounding neighborhoods? And again, it's not just Foundry Eastman, but it's all of them that I think should be taken into account. So I would advocate as follows. I think the town will maximize its likelihood of this passing a town meeting by reducing to what you need to do to comply and not overboard, and not just for our area, but the other areas as well. I mean, I would advocate on behalf of Belmont, Washington, and Roach Brothers as well. Second, you try to keep as much property within local control, because I've seen the benefit of when things come before the Planning and Zoning Board, the push back and forth with developers. How about you do this? How about you make that concession? And I think there's a lot of benefit for that. Third, we try to keep our commercial base, and I don't see any why we should be giving any incentive for the nearly 12-acre parcel at 35 Eastman that's currently a warehouse facility to give somebody an incentive to come in and develop that just as residential rather than its current use as warehouse space. And fourth, I think we should do this to avoid, further burdening the community generally. And you've heard on the traffic issues and so forth on that, and the work that's going to be done on the road. At the end of the day, it's still going to be a 2-lane road, and it's still going to be traffic problems. It's a nightmare now. And just on Friday night, I got a call from Maria, panicked because she was out walking her dogs, and our neighbor Fran, 79 years old, trying to play Russian roulette to get out on Route 106, and her car gets smacked and pushed into a stone wall. So we're walking the dogs back, we're walking her back, and so forth. And talk to the folks in Gaslight and Lamplighter about what the impact is. They have no other way to get out anywhere if they leave. You try to take a left coming out of one of those units. I would encourage all of you to come down to our area, drive in during rush hour, go into Gaslight or Lamplighter, and then try to get out and try to see what your quality of life is going to be doing that every day.
Thank you.
So, at the end of the day on all of this, what I'm advocating for, because I am in favor of this passing, but if you do it in a way where and I understand you have to have some leeway to make sure that you're going to pass on the compliance tests, but to limit it. And frankly, I think what makes sense in light of the fact that this district has already contributed over 550, almost half of the town's multi-use housing. No other area in town can come close to that. And I would advocate now in favor of just keeping it to Avalon at the 22. And by all the numbers I've seen, you guys will still comply with doing so. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Dal, if you'll indulge me a question.
Yes, absolutely.
I have two. The first is, if you keep it to Avalon, because our calculations don't comport with that. And it's not just, forgive me, I know we've got someone in the audience that's gonna take out their calculator. But the calculations are not necessarily intuitive. They're certainly over my head.
These are based on your numbers.
So I understand
Sorry.
that. How did you come up with that idea that if we only have Avalon back there, we can still comply?
So first of all, you don't need to do it for the 25 contiguous, because you have that up at Roach Brothers.
Up at Roach,
right?
I got it.
And then the numbers overall, you have 1,393, so just try by subtraction. You have 11.7 acres for 35 Eastman, and you have approximately 9 acres, and correct me, Mary, if I'm wrong, but approximately 9 acres for the Five Fingers.
Yep.
And frankly, I was in favor at the February 12th meeting, if the warehouse district was not included, I would have been great, and I'm kind of all done with this. But the pushback of putting that back in and not taking into consideration the issues for these folks has caused me, and I think you can find a lot of other people are gonna get galvanized, the more aggressive we are on this. And again, I'm in favor of this passing at town meeting, but I think there's a real risk that if you go forward and you're overly aggressive at it, it gets voted down at the May town meeting, and you try to come back with something more narrow, and you may have awakened the beast in the town where folks are gonna vote no, even if it's not in our interest to do so.
Thank you
So-
for that response. So first of all, just so we're running the numbers here, we
Mhm.
don't think that works, only Avalon. So I don't know that that's something we're going to be able to consider tonight. But I just, in terms of what, you know, these are my words, and I take no offense, please, to them. But in terms of the scare tactics, I mean, we have been very sensitive to all of the issues that you've mentioned. As you pointed out, we went from a 95-acre district down to 40 there. And again, we were trying to be sensitive to the fact that we already went through this process. Now, I know tonight there's been a lot of emphasis placed on the difference between by right versus special permit. I don't think that's the panacea that this is sort of being put out there as. If the zoning allows for a certain type of development, yes, there can be a special permit process by which the community has some input and the planning board has some input. That doesn't just halt development. And so I want to make it clear that what we're talking about is not the difference between developing that area versus not developing. The difference is, well, some small portion of that could be developed by right versus all of it can be developed by special permit. So I just want to make that distinction clear.
Yeah, so look, by the calculation, the 35 Eastman is 11.7 acres. I think it's approximately 9 for the 5 fingers. So you add those two together and you multiply by 15, assuming that, just hear me out for a second, you multiply by 15, assuming that you can maximize that, you know, that's 310 units. You're at 1393 now. And as Scott was mentioning earlier, why is the warehouse district being included in ours and not here? This thing is carved out. It is readily apparent that this thing is carved out from what otherwise would be a contiguous district here. So if you're going to, you know, include one, frankly, that one would be, in my understanding, is that business is fine. They don't want to move. They have no desire to move, so it's unlikely to be developed in any event. But I think either way you slice it, you still meet your numbers. So am I wrong on that, on the
We don't need to
307?
So,
include that
just-
slice, but
Just-
the
just
math.
hold-
If I-
hold
if I-
on.
Just one second, thank you.
Just doing quick math on that, I think I would get 1130 for Washington North the way it is, Washington Belmont the way it is, and just Avalon. And that's just adding the 344 units. I don't know off the top of my head what so that's 1130. And we've stressed over and over again that it's a complicated algorithm. And while the board's intent wasn't to go way above, it also was to have enough cushion that when it passes at town meeting, it also passes compliance with the state.
Right.
And so that gives a little bit of
But you have
cushion.
200 units as a cushion, which
Yep.
I think is
Yeah.
quite.
And is that just with Avalon out there? The
400
1130?
That's just with Avalon, because if you take, so we have Washington North, 498, and this is using the compliance model. 288 for Belmont, so, you know, whatever that is. And then, I just added 344 units, because that's how many exist at Avalon right now, and that's pretty well developed.
So that's it, right, and I don't think there's any likelihood that's gonna be redeveloped. I agree with one of the comments that was made in one of the prior meetings. I think a lot of the folks are very happy there and, you know, like the community. But that's a 200 thing cushion. And again, it's not a scare tactic, it really isn't, because I've been fully in favor of this. I'm on 2 town committees, on the Swift Park Committee, I'm the vice chair of the Easton 300 Committee. Easton's 300th anniversary coming up 2025. Put a little plug in here. I'm very pro-Easton on this, and I recognize the value of not only the housing itself, but also of the benefits to us in having the local control of this, and having the grant money that we've received over the past, whether it's Main Street or whether it's for the sewer project. But I think what you're hearing from this room is do what's necessary to comply, and folks will be supportive of it. And then at the same time, you can address things on a local basis, what makes most sense for a particular area. I think people like the idea of having a citizens board who has that control, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all from the state where it's a matter of right. Because those developers are gonna come in, they have one objective, to maximize their profits. And I honestly feel that if you rezone it, they're gonna they're gonna build it at some point.
Before you sit down,
I'm happy to stand.
one more question or comment for your reaction. One thing that's sort of that's been gnawing at me throughout this process and listening to the comments from Foundry Street is that the primary concern, at least as it's been kind of conveyed to me, has been the traffic on Foundry Street. And from just a sort of, I don't know, pure economics perspective, one might think that putting, mixed use in one area, potentially creating a walkable area, which is the idea and the concept behind the road modernization and adding some density to that Foundry area. That's the idea. That you would reduce traffic, so you don't have people driving from Belmont, Washington to Target in and out all the time. Now I know we're hearing no's, and I get that, but I just, from a traffic engineering standpoint, that's the general consensus on how walkable neighborhoods benefit traffic in an area. I'm not expecting anyone to accept it tonight, but I did want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, let me just briefly address that, because it's still going to be a two-lane road, and the engineering, I understand they're in the 25% design phases. They're going to add a bike lane and a walking path along with it. People are still going to, you're going to have more traffic than ever. There's 94 additional units over and above the traffic problems we have now. They're already in the planning stages or already underway. And we haven't even seen what the results of those will be. And on the issue of the compliance testing, as you all know, I've been advocating for months with the Planning and Zoning Board, when you guys submitted a compliance testing in November, to do so with a reduced district. At that point, it went from 95 to 68, and I was saying, please, come up with something about 30 acres at the time to put to the state. I was unsuccessful in my request to have that submitted to the state as part of the compliance back in November. And this was exactly my concern, that we're gonna get to a point, town meeting is coming up, well, we gotta stick with this because we haven't done the pre-compliance review on this reduced district. So I've been a voice on this for months and months on this, and I just don't buy the notion that, we're not gonna have enough time to do the compliance on it or whatever. But the figures here, 1,100, that's 200 units extra. It's just a piece of advice. I want this to pass, I really do. Is if you just do enough to comply, I think you're gonna find these folks will all be voting in favor of it at town meeting. If we overreach on it, I think there's a real risk that you get a no vote and you're galvanizing. I don't agree at all with the anti-apartment people. In our group, I know won't, because there are a lot of condominium owners here and so forth. But there's a strong undercurrent in town, and I will argue against them, because I'm very much in favor of more apartments, more diversity of housing. But if you go forward on it, you're really at risk of galvanizing those folks.
And I thank you and I've given you a lot of airtime because I asked you some questions. But I just, and I want to get back to the testimony as well, but just kind of dovetailing on some of the same themes that we're hearing tonight, by way of applause, just so I can have a sense and my fellow board members can have a sense, if we, or by hand, if we were to reduce the district down to, say, the 20 acres as it was proposed earlier tonight, would we get everyone here's support, or just about everyone's here's support at town meeting?
Right, to be clear, that the
How
Avalon
many,
parcel.
what's the impact on the number of units? Because if you go.
That's what we've got to figure out.
If you go above 913, there's gonna be a huge pushback. You're not gonna get passed at town meeting. I can
Well,
tell you that.
we have to go above 913.
Right.
We
So
don't
if
have
we
a choice.
have a buffer of like 50, 400 is not gonna work.
Right, but I guess just to be clear, what I was just proposing was essentially.
The state's gonna do some leeway, given that.
Yes.
Can I see some hands?
Is yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Avalon only.
Avalon only, yes.
They're talking Avalon, not this.
So basically, well, I mean, either way, you could slice it in half. I understand. Okay, all right, we're gonna get back to the testimony. Yes. I'm sorry, the woman behind you, she had her hand up
You
first.
mentioned sidewalks and availability. I no longer have a car. I live near the Five Corners. It is scary for me to walk across the street. I will not cross, even though there's the buttons, the 106. It is not safe to walk. I stay as far away from the street as possible because of the traffic currently. It's scary to walk.
Thank you. I'm forgetting to read in some of the other testimonies, so give me a minute here. This is from Amy Spencer. I'm writing in support of Easton's proposed MBTA community zoning districts, as this is a state mandate. I support our town's compliance. Our compliance is especially important since non-compliance would mean we would lose eligibility to apply for other state funding and grants for future town projects. The team of staff and citizens who have led Easton's MBTA community zoning project has done a thorough and thoughtful job of figuring out how we should comply with this new mandate. They've looked at this through the lens of what's truly best for our community and also addresses the focus of our town on providing more diverse housing options. Thus, they have proposed 3 sub-districts. I think this route of planning 3 sub-districts rather than having one larger district is smart, as it won't put a burden on one area of the town. It's also important to note that the state mandate does require us to build and develop these districts. It's meant to be a planning measure. If our town decides to develop these districts in the future, a sound plan that has our community's best interest in mind will be in place. Thank you to the planning team for working so diligently for our community. Amy Spencer, 23 Jenny Lynch Street. All right. Yes, sir.
Joel Antolini, Highland Street. And my question that I have is related to density of the areas that have been proposed. And the impact of that density distribution, especially in light of if it stayed as it was at the beginning of this meeting, the Eastman Foundry section of the project could house over 2/3 percentage of the available unit space versus shared lesser amounts for the other 2 areas. Is there a plan to I'm in favor of cutting off some of that property that's available so that instead of having 630 units available, now you're down to 400 units available for that one parcel. Is there a plan to further mitigate it further so that the entire property isn't at the whim of a developer to say, I want to put 600 units in this one spot and neglect the other 2 areas the town has already designated as those areas? Shouldn't we then take the initiative and say, the max number is this for this spot, max number of units for that spot, and then max number for the other spot? So that way it is truly shared throughout the town as opposed to all of it in one parcel as proposed.
I mean, I guess the response from my perspective is we've really listened to that objection and we've done our best to spread the wealth, so to speak. I think one of the reasons why you see similar acreage, like for instance out at Roach Brothers, goes back to the way the calculations are done. And again, this is a little bit over my head, so I probably will defer to Stephanie on the numbers. But I think there's a lot of wetlands back there behind Roach Brothers, which even though there's a lot of acreage out there, we didn't get as much bang for our buck in terms of the numbers. So I hope that answers some of your question.
No, I'm more concerned with a developer seeing a profitable lot and developing that to its fullest and neglecting the rest of the overlay areas that were identified and not having anything going on
I
over
apologize.
there.
I misunderstood your question. I mean, I think this goes back to Stephanie's first slide, which is that all this is a change in the zoning. Nobody is requiring any builders to come in here and build anything. You know, developers are going to look at the various properties and they're going to decide if it's worth the money or not, which in terms of Foundry Eastman, I mean, I think the fact that we haven't seen developers coming in and asking for special permits says something. I mean, it does to me anyway, because, you know, if the economics were such that we were going to see development here, we would have seen requests already. at least at the rapid pace that I think everyone in this room is expecting. That being said, I understand your point. If we're trying to incentivize the development in a thoughtful way, which everyone here has participated in, and spread it out among 3 districts, you'd like to see those 3 districts developed. We don't have control over that, and there's really not much we can do to, ensure that it's developed in an equal manner.
Can I just respond very briefly, just 10 seconds, honestly?
That's all you get, Dale.
No, I know. There was a developer who's already appeared in
It's just
front.
monopolized by like 2 people, no one else can get a word in.
Here, come back, we'll get you next.
Please,
No,
come
it's
back.
enough, I mean, you
No,
have like
come
10
back.
minutes.
No, no.
Most public meetings are supposed to get 3. And we let people go on, and then we're just dragging on.
Come on in, you'll be next. Don't leave, seriously. What, actually, why don't you come up, Dale, we're gonna, come on, sir, please, come on up.
My name is Ryan Cook, 18 Brentwood Drive. I'm the current chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Stephanie's team did a very good job of picking out areas in town. She presented to the ZBA last month, and the reality is they picked out areas that are very unlikely to be developed because it's not favorable to a developer to go in. So the chances of them going in and doing development, even on Belmont Street, they got to coordinate purchasing all those lots to make anything worthwhile. So the chance of anything going on is ridiculous. The real challenge overall is none of these plans are going to affect affordability at all. It's not going to change a damn thing about affordability in Massachusetts. The problem is how everyone's voting in the Commonwealth. We have terrible, so you go back, look at the Federal Bank of St. Louis. You can pull up all the data on their website, and I did this week. In 1984, the average salary, the median salary in the US, covered 73% of the average home price. In 2023, it covered 15.3%. So the problem is home prices have risen 513%, and salary, average median wage, has risen 31%. None of this is going to make a darn bit of difference when it comes to affordable housing. We'd all love to see affordable housing. That only happens by changing zoning bylaws, adding in sewer, so you can get a little more density. So now you can start to build homes that people actually want. What ends up happening is the land's so expensive, developers got to put these giant houses up at $1 million to be able to make any money. But instead, if we could get smaller zones, have some sewer, and then you can start to get 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes at 1,500 square foot that are affordable, that most people want. I mean, I've downsized my house twice because I don't need the space. And I'm at a ranch now because that's all I need. I don't want a big house and a big yard to take care of. But the challenge is current zoning bylaws across the state force developers to purchase large plots of land and build large houses to make any money. None of this is going to have any effect at all on affordability. And everyone's getting wrapped up in number of units here and number of units there. It's irrelevant because the developer's never going to be able to go in there and make those numbers work because they picked out areas where they're already fully developed and they'll have to tear everything down. It's not going to make a bit of difference. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go on, I'm going to read another one. This one is from Chris Lockhead at 49 South Street. My family of 4 moved here from Stoughton in 2017 and loves the Easton community and is very involved in the schools, sports, real estate, and local activities. Please consider and lower the amount of units proposed for the MBTA zoning overlay district at Foundry Eastman. We have weekly vehicle accidents already at Foundry at South Street. There was another last night. Sawmill Village and Old Forge Commons will add density over the next couple of years, and it is shocking that several hundred units are even a consideration without first seeing how these 2 other new developments will affect the area's safety. The area has already become unsafe even for my daughter to stand on the corner and wait for her bus with vehicles exceeding 50 miles an hour on a narrow 2-lane road where head-on collisions are only a few feet away. We know a pedestrian recently lost his life crossing the street across from Gaslight Village. The current working families in the neighborhood have already been burdened with $30,000 in sewer betterment fees we did not ask for. We have a brand new septic system. Please keep our neighborhood safe and minimize the number of units being considered. Thank you. Yes.
Bob Schuner, 75R Highland Street, resident for 45 years. And just for when you made your opening, I was enamored by Easton. We raised our family here and came here. Highland Street, as you know, runs parallel to Boundary. And the gentleman that just left, it does matter the number of units, from a safety issue, from a traffic issue. I have seen anyone living on Highland Street now. The people that are on 106, when that gets bottleneck, since we had our sewer lines put in, the best kept secret has been Highland Street. That is down there. I come down, the Furnace District is an old historical village. The street can't accommodate the traffic that we see there. I have walkers, neighbors, dogs. We've had generational changes. I'm in real estate, Easton real estate. I love the town. I love everything. I would support this, but we have to control the number of units, and that's too many units behind that wall. Just too many. The people that are walking, I see people walking against traffic. And I asked them, why are you doing that? These are my neighbors, because they're afraid of getting hit. This is a reality. We've had a generational change. There are little ones in there. I sell real estate. They're skateboarding, walking the dogs, bicycling on a street that they can't do that anymore with the traffic. Once something happens to 106, everyone runs down the Highland Street. It's backed up. It's dangerous. It's a safety issue. I would support this if we can control the number of units in there. If you can cut 200 units, he says it doesn't make any difference. It does. It does. So.
Thank you.
Janet Cole, South Street. I just want to reiterate, it's important to keep the numbers of units down. And I've written on my paper way back on affordable. So there's some pieces I do agree with that gentleman that left about. And I have a question. Is there a figure for affordable? Is there a mandate that says if you build this, this is the maximum rent? Because I've never seen it.
So the answer is yes. There is a formula that is provided, and Wayne Beitler is the community planner. He works in my office, and he can explain that, but in the interest of time, yes, there is a number, and the units would be offered at 80% affordable, 80% affordable at the 80% of AMI.
Yeah, so what they do is they calculate a rent that is about 1/3 of the monthly income for a household making 80% of the area median income, which is updated every year by Housing and Urban Development. And if you want to call our office, I can give a much deeper explanation of how they do that. But that is how they calculate affordable rents, affordable purchase prices for ownership units.
Is that mean based on the town's income?
It's on the area median income, and in Easton, we are in a two-town, it's called fair housing, fair market.
Easton and what?
Easton and Rainham.
Okay.
So it's Easton, Rainham, HUD, fair market area.
And then the last comment is, I appreciate the proposed intent and the hypothetical around sidewalks, but I think it's tough to talk hypotheticals because until you live in the reality of it, it's a tough concept to push. But I do believe the group, as you asked for a show of hands, would be in favor of passing this because we don't want to get rid of funding that helps better the town, but the units have to be cut down.
Thank you. I'm going to read another one. This is from Jean Parinello, 3 Christopher Drive. As an Easton resident for the past 25 years, I've been pleased with the progress of our town to increase housing available to present and future residents. I support the approval of the plan for zoning changes that will allow for builders to build additional units of housing. My preference of the location is the Roach Brothers Plaza, as I feel Foundry Street location already has sufficient housing options, where the Roach Brothers Plaza area does not.
I'm sorry, I've already spoken, I'll shut up.
I just have, Jeff Hansen, 9 Judith Road. I just have a quick question. I know that chapter 48 says a minimum of 15 units per acre. Is it possible for Easton to put on there a maximum?
I think your slide actually said maximum, but it's really a minimum.
It's
I think
not
it's
a
a
maximum, no. What you're required to do, I think that's what it's
It's a
getting at, right?
minimum, the district needs to accommodate a minimum of 15 units per acre.
Chapter
and-
48 says a minimum of 15 units per acre, right here.
Right,
That's a minimum.
right, and our,
So-
so the slide you're referencing is the zoning that we're proposing, the language of the zoning, where the limit would be a
So you would
maximum.
change the minimum to a maximum then? Okay.
Right, because it's a minimum of and a maximum of.
Right.
So they can
Thank
have
you.
up to 15 units per acre.
Yes.
Carrie Parry, 17 Galahad Way. I actually own 31 Eastman Street. My husband and I bought it in 16. Moved our business from Stoughton. We run a tool and industrial supply company, which we actually supply to the MBTA, Keolis, different facilities like that. I'm totally for affordable housing. I've owned apartment buildings in Stoughton with affordable housing. Two things here. There's been no consideration to us as an owner. 35 Eastman Street is massive. It abuts Avalon. Avalon, whether you know it or not, is considering if that goes through, they will be buying that property. I know that for a fact. They're gonna gobble up all of the properties. Where do I move my business to? I employ people in this town, which is what you guys wanted originally. You wanted businesses to come into town. You wanted to employ people in town. I am the person. I'm doing that. I'm living here. I don't understand why you would take a property that big that's abutting Avalon and not think that Avalon is gonna gobble that up. They have the money, they have the resources, that entire strip they will buy up. And the entire thing will continue all the way down. I'm concerned for my business, I'm concerned for my property, I'm concerned for my home, I'm concerned for everybody in this end of town. It's very overwhelming to think that we were never any consideration. We're the fingers. But nobody's ever come to us and said, hey, we might just gobble up all your land. I mean, I don't think any of you would like it if I came to your neighborhood and said, I'm gonna wipe all your land, I'm gonna put it on there so someone can buy it.
Can you explain, so do you own the land?
I own the land.
So you don't have to sell it? This
I
has,
don't have to sell it, but
Ever.
if you let 35 go through, Avalon is gonna turn that into more apartments. I'm gonna be a sitting duck, surrounded by apartments. Do you want that in your house? Do you want that in your business? I don't want that in my business. I didn't buy the building so I could be gobbled up. I'm in a strip of commercial buildings, and there are 2 empty lots behind the bank that the gentleman owns that is looking to sell it. And the building next to me, they're looking to sell it. I will be the lone person sitting there amongst everything else that's gonna get gobbled up. And I'm concerned about that. My father-in-law was born in this town 89 years ago. The Pyries have deep roots in this town. We moved our business to this town for that reason. I feel like the town doesn't give any consideration to business owners. You want people to come in to employ people, but yet you don't really work with them. I'm paying a huge betterment on something I don't use. I can't even get in and out of Paquonicket, let alone get in and out of my building with tractor trailers trying to come in and stuff like that. I just feel like nobody's ever considered, you know, not just the residents, but the businesses that are there. You know, we pay big taxes in this town, and I don't feel like anybody's ever given us any consideration. So I would like to see 35 come off of that, for the main reason that it will be gobbled up, and I will be surrounded.
Thank you.
My name's Tess O'Brien. I live at 54 Gaslight. And we're talking about money, acres, commercial building, and all of that. And I think what it comes down to is quality of life. And I would start by saying, I really appreciate all your time. Put in a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort. Thank you for being here and listening to us. I don't know if any of you live in the Foundry area. I have no idea where any of you live. But I do. And I can tell you about the quality of my life since I've been in Easton, almost 25 years now. And I have been living in a construction zone for years. So what was conservation land behind me, which enticed me to buy it, became building. And it's every morning, 7 o'clock, drills, bulldozers, whatever. Then it was the sewer project, and then you couldn't get out of the street because it was construction on the street. That went on for years. Then they were, gonna be building on South Street, and now they're gonna add more. Getting out of Foundry Street is a challenge each and every day. I cannot imagine, and those, I think it's 144 houses that are going up on the left side of 106 going towards Mansfield, that hasn't even been built yet. A lot of the building hasn't even been built yet. So we're gonna put that together with the additional units. I can't imagine the traffic, and I mean, sidewalks, that's great, but I don't know about other complexes, but at Gaslight Village, there's a lot of older people, myself included. They're not going to want to be walking on sidewalks. Some of them, they're in their later years. And you mentioned about managing traffic. I don't know what that means. What does that mean? How are you going to manage a traffic with only, one lane each way that's already bottlenecked everywhere you go? Can you speak a little bit more about how you're going to do that? How are you going to manage the flow of traffic that's going to be a result from all of this? And again, like everybody else here, I'm not against any of this, and I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness, but I think it comes down to quality of life. And if you're not living in that area, you don't know what the quality of life is like and what it's been like for the last several years between the sewer, the construction there, the construction behind there. It's not a good thing, and it's not safe, and I can't envision what it's gonna look like and what you're gonna do to manage the traffic. You mentioned managing the traffic, but other than a sidewalk, what is the plan?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to make a
Yeah,
comment?
just very quickly, I want to say I do live in that area. I know that area
Thank
really
you.
well. The traffic is horrible. I think the sad reality of all of this is that I don't think there's very much that can be done about it. It's a through road as well. People going and coming from Mansfield and from the Bridgewaters all the time. All of those communities are booming, and they're gonna continue to boom because people wanna live in this area, and it's relatively affordable still compared to, even though it's unaffordable, it's relatively affordable compared to closer into Boston. So I think in any of these areas in Easton that we're talking about, traffic is just a really unfortunate reality. And I 100% I'm with you. There's no sidewalks. I can't get out of those when I take a left. I can't get out.
So what is the plan to provide for the added traffic that's gonna ensue? I'm just wondering, because you mentioned that, you were gonna be managing the traffic, so I'm wondering what is that?
Well, in terms of the road update, I'll let Stephanie speak to that, but I mean, I think the traffic lights will be a part of that solution. Is that a perfect solution? Probably not. But I think one of the key points that, at least from my perspective, I keep coming back to, is that if you promote a walkable, livable neighborhood, like with sidewalks, like with commercial businesses in the area, yes, not everybody is going to walk everywhere. I agree with that. That being said, the idea is for more people to be located in that area and to be comfortable walking in that area to go and get groceries or to go out to dinner, whatever it is. And so the idea, and this is, I think, goes to a longstanding policy here in Easton, is to promote that idea. I mean, one of the things that I think is fairly obvious about Foundry Street is the dangerousness of that road because of this, the speeds and the traffic. It's not just the traffic, I think that's a part of it, but I do think the speeds and the lack of sidewalks definitely plays a role into the security issues that I think a few of you have raised tonight. So I'm hoping it can address that a little bit. I don't think it solves the traffic issue altogether, but I think it may help. Stephanie, could you maybe tell more about the road improvement plan?
Well, what I can add is, again, we talked about the fact that there will be a light at Quanticut and Foundry Street. And right now, my understanding is that the timing of the lights is not synchronized such that provides for those gaps in the flow of traffic, and that's how one of the ways you control the traffic. In addition to by adding sidewalks, by adding bicycle lanes, that just that has a natural calming effect, but also with that timing, so that things are synchronized. The example I give is my son lived in Brooklyn for a while on one of the busiest roads in Brooklyn. And if you were driving along that roadway, it's pretty much a straightaway, similar to Foundry Street. It had lights at several of the intersections, and they were timed such that if you kept your speed at a certain speed level, which was a safe level for all the users of the road, you would be able to proceed through all of the lights without having to stop. So it's a synchronization. And there was another comment you made.
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, because that is part of the problem, part of the frustration is like you're sitting there waiting for one side of the traffic to go, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then the other side's going.
Right.
So that would be a very
Right.
viable solution, the sidewalks as well, but
Thank you.
how much, I don't know. Thank you.
I'm going to read another one. Okay. This is from Lori Pachito at 64 Summer Street. I'd like to express my concern and opine against MBTA zoning communities in Easton. Firstly, our town is growing beyond its infrastructure. Traffic in general has increased exponentially over the years. Adding 400 units of housing likely means adding at least 400 more vehicles on our roads. The areas chosen for these buildings are already congested with retail business traffic. It makes no sense to compound the problem with more traffic. 400 more households will add more students to the schools, creating more burden on the system. Shall we build a new high school next? Our taxes are pretty high for a town that abuts Brockton. It seems we are becoming Brockton with all these apartment complexes. I think we are going in the wrong direction. The town character is dwindling. I'm definitely not in favor of this project and ask that we retain what little small town vibe we have left. We have a few more letters, but yes, ma'am.
Hi, Anne Marie Antonini from Highland Street. I'm just curious, do you anticipate that if it does not pass the town meeting, that we will get hit with a lawsuit from the Attorney General like Milton has?
Well, as a lawyer, I can tell you, I have not gone through the lawsuit. It was just filed this afternoon.
Right.
But if the Attorney General's statements are, any indication, I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, so if you've been following it, you know that they immediately, the state withdrew funding that had been already awarded to the city. And right now, we have $400,000 in grants that were awarded this past fall that would be subject to rescission. And I think I can speak for the board and the town administrator. The town would expect to be hit with a lawsuit. Connor?
So if I could just say, so I was late, I apologize for my kids to bed. Connor Green, the town administrator. Yes, obviously we can't speak for the Attorney General, but we would have no reason to think that, particularly with the filing of the lawsuit against Milton this morning, which I have read, but I'm not an attorney, so I'm definitely not going to opine on it, because there's a handful in this room. This is just the Attorney General doing what she clearly and unequivocally stated she would consider in writing. This is not, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. As the new administration took office 2 years ago, I'm sorry, COVID has warped everything, but it was either 2021 or 22 that the Attorney General issued written guidance publicly that said the shall does not typically in our language convey optional, right? We're laughing, but people have said, well, we've looked at, some communities have costed out, well, maybe we can afford to lose the grants. Easton can't. We cannot. Setting that aside, just because the law stipulates that you would lose grants if you don't comply doesn't therefore spell out so compliance is optional. That was in the lawsuit filed today, and again, the Attorney General made clear publicly at least a full year ago to folks as they were going through a years-long effort to prepare for these votes, which will be hard, as this is shown, right? No one here is suggesting that change like this is just a hand wave and it's easy, or that, you know, we just say, well, the state mandated it, so do it and like it. That's not a super popular thing. But yes, we'd have no reason, outside, in addition to the stated intent in the past and then the actual lawsuit being filed today, to expect any different.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sure. Bill Donahue, 45 Forest Edge Road. I was curious if the town has talked to the school system to get some indication as to what impact on school enrollment would be as a consequence of this housing, as well as what the impact would be on our proposed police, fire, and highway building that we're paying for it as well. And then a comment as relates to Roach Brothers. As we know, there's a proposal, obviously long-standing, for the MBTA to extend the Stoughton commuter rail down through Easton with a stop right at Roach Brothers. So I challenge you when you say, okay, we can only do like 20 acres in Roach Brothers, because that's, to me, the heart of what the state's pushing for, is to get people to live close to where the communities are. You look at Mansfield, they have thousands of apartments right near the Mansfield Community Rail Station. So why are we not putting, have we actually done a study of the wetlands at Roach Brothers to indicate that that's the minimum amount we can have, or should we look again at that to assess, particularly given what the plans of the MBTA to potentially go down there, put more potential housing in that district?
In terms of our considerations on that last point, the issue isn't so much the acreage. The issue is how many units that we can get out there based on the calculations. So it's because of the wetlands. I think as a board, and I'm speaking for myself here, I think the reason that showed up as an appealing location is exactly what you just said. Even the possibility, remote as it may be, that the train could end up right there, I think made it certainly an appealing spot to locate some of the zoning. So, the issue isn't so much with the acreage. I think we've identified 33 acres there. The reason that we don't get similar units out of it is more because of the wetlands. In terms of the other issues, because I think you raised some really good points. Actually, Connor, I hate to put you on the spot, but the answer is we have talked about this, and
Sure.
Connor has some good responses and thoughts.
Thank you for putting me on the spot.
Welcome.
So, yes, is the short answer. We do know, because we have, and you hear, as we've done, or we've, the planning board has done a lot of this work, looking at housing. Folks have correctly identified that there's been a lot of housing growth in Easton in the past 10 years, that there's been a lot of multifamily development, mostly through 40B and 40R. What is great about living in Massachusetts is that a lot of this stuff is tracked, right? So the number of students who are in a public school system is tracked, it's reported, the state tracks it. So despite Easton, in a 10-year window, adding 1,000 units of housing, right? And so even that, I think, is important context. From 2010 to 2020, that was roughly, Easton went from 8,100 to 9,100 homes. So that was an increase of 13% in the housing stock. The population only grew by 8%. And it was mostly in the older population. And in that same 10-year window, school enrollment dropped from a high of about 3,900 to 3,400. And that's not because there's something wrong with Easton or our schools. We have excellent schools. We have a beautiful new school, thanks to voters in this community. It's in part ties back to the predicate of this law, which is that young families can't afford to live. So the folks who are raising school-age kids are having far fewer of them now than in prior generations. And so you have communities like Easton and all around the Northeast in particular, it's not just Massachusetts, where housing, the total number of units may be growing, and this is why the diversification of those units is so important, because you have folks who are living longer, who are either divorced, or they're widowed, or their kids have gone out to college, and right now in Easton, most of them can't afford to come back. So you need more units of total housing to accommodate roughly the same amount of community members. But as far as the impact of housing, multifamily housing on school enrollment, again, we know because this is kind of public data that I believe is on the town's website, so folks can go check it, you don't have to take my word for it. Multifamily housing in Easton has far fewer children per unit than a single family home. So if a concern is primarily kind of predicated on, well, if there's 200 units of rental, that will be a huge hit to enrollment. Not necessarily, and what we know from actual experience here now is that there's roughly half as many school-age kids per rental unit in Easton as per home, which makes some logical sense, right? Because a lot of these units are not that big. A lot of them are 1 or 2 bedrooms. And for folks who have the means, they're going to, more often than not, as this data would suggest, pick a home with a few more bedrooms and maybe a yard. And even single-family homes. When you spread it out across the roughly 8,000 homes in Easton, the average number of school-age kids is half, 0.5, right? So it's and it's a quarter, so for rentals. So it has not had an effect of overwhelming the schools within.
And if I could just add a question, did you do a study or did someone do a walkthrough to determine what part of the area whether is wetlands versus not? Is there some map or something else that gives us some comfort that we did the due diligence around that as well?
Okay, so right now, normally when we refer to wetlands and the wetland area and we say it's conservative, we mean that it may be slightly over what's actually on the ground, but the model that the algorithm, the calculation that the state used and gave us to use to calculate the developable area of a parcel extracts the wetlands out based on geographical information system data, and that data looks at the wetlands and actually is generally far less than what the actual wetland is. So the calculation that we use, the algorithm, it extracts that wetland, and that's how it determines the total, what they believe is usable data. And it's a conservative number, meaning that that number of developable land is probably more than actually is on the ground.
So there, just if I can repeat, and I won't belabor this point. So there potentially is more buildable land there.
Less.
Or less, but you did not do a study. You're just basing it upon historical maps, or because obviously Easton and a lot of Easton's underwater.
Right, right. And the wetland, and by the way, you know, one of the things, because there's so much detail to these guidelines, the Wetlands Protection Act is not superseded because of this zoning. You still have to comply with the State Wetlands Protection Act as well as Easton's local bylaw.
Thank you. I'm going to read another one. All right, this one is from Kathy, I'll come back to you, Dale, I promise. Kathy Adler, 459 Bay Road. At a time when our population is expected to increase in age while hopefully also drawing young families to our wonderful town, 2 things seem especially important. First is to work to ensure that housing is available to allow existing residents to age in place, if not in their existing homes, into smaller, more affordable, less isolated neighborhood homes. While I am speaking for myself here, my work on the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee has made me keenly aware that aging in place is an important factor for Easton residents, as is the fear that no affordable options may be available when people want to downsize. The allowance of the 15-unit per acre zoning might help ease those fears if those residences are affordable. Second, I am also aware that Easton has received grants for important infrastructure projects, like the Main Street roadway improvements, the 5 Corner Sewer project, and the current design work for the Foundry Street roadway improvement project, because of its designation as an MBTA adjacent community. Because of that, and because I know that Easton needs to continue its progress in making the town all age-friendly and accessible, and this adoption can help ease the financial pain on the town, I support the proposed MBTA community zoning districts, and I so appreciate all the information made available about it and the obvious hard work of the Planning and Zoning Board. Yes.
Thank you. Just 2 quick points. First, I just want to remind the board that there actually was a developer who came before the board about a year ago. respect to 2 of those parcels of the fingers behind the thing. And they came forward with a proposal that were just gonna be these plain block buildings, apartments, and this was before the MBTA zoning was made known to them. And I took comfort from the fact that the board was giving some pushback to them about what that would look like. And that's kind of my point on this, is that we'd like to have the local control over it. And I know from having talked to a broker who was sort of involved in that, is once they found out about the MBTA zoning, they pulled off and they haven't done anything since. I've been sort of monitoring everything, and I suspect they're just waiting for the MBTA zoning to go through. So they see it as an advantage for their development to maximize profits to the MBTA, as opposed to going through that process with a special permit and pushback from the board. Second quick point on the traffic issue. I went and located the data from the Mass Department of Transportation. It's all publicly available. You can actually look at the actual surveys that they've done with the rumble strips out there on the road. And I looked at our area, because they did it this has been over like 10 years or so, in the same spot, kind of near Old Pond. And I looked at Depot Street, I looked at 138 up by, going towards Roach Brothers, in between by Belmont Street. And we've seen an increase in traffic in our area when you compare the historical data that no other area in Easton has seen. And that's what's, I think, driving all of this. And so we asked the board, whether it's the MBTA issues or when you're considering special permits for that area, just to keep this in mind. These folks can't take a left to come out of it, so we're just asking the board to take those into account, and appreciate it.
And I appreciate those comments, and I do, now that you mention it, I do recall the proposal. I think, just the thing that I want to reiterate, though, is that if the concern is primarily one of safety and traffic, the special permit is not a panacea for that either. And so there's a difference between some additional density up there and, additional density via special permit. And so I want to make sure that distinction is being made clear from me, so that everyone understands what's really on the table here.
Yeah, and toward that end, we had David Field along with the rest of the town officials to meet with the Furnace Village Group, or many of them, over on January 25th at the VFW. And I asked that question of him, what can be done on the traffic thing? And the answer, as I understood it, was they really, other than the light that we're going to put on it, which I agree will help some, they cannot do a light at Gaslight, and they cannot do a light at Lamplighter, because there isn't sufficient cross traffic. And I looked at the regs on that,
Right.
what David indicated, and so he basically said, we can't do anything else from coming here to sort of, in terms of any other lights that would be put in. As Stephanie was mentioning, sort of time the traffic coming through, so we actually have gaps in there. So it's not gonna get any better, and especially when you have nearly 100 more units that are already underway and planning coming on board. So we're just hopeful that the board will continue to take those things into account as they go forward, whether MBTA or otherwise in other projects.
Thank you.
Hi, just real quickly, Patty Weiss, just to support what Dale just said. I do live in Gaslight, and it's a nightmare getting out, and I lived in Manhattan for years, and even to me, it's a bit disheartening. But I think that overall the optics look really bad, and I think that, many of us are just really disappointed in what's been happening all along the 106 corridor, because we're the ones that have to deal with it every day. And you really can't do much, and I feel like that's sort of the takeaway here is, well, sorry, that, there's really nothing we can do. And I guess, in my mind, I don't buy that. I don't want to be able to just say, okay, oh well, that's it. So I am hoping that you can be a little bit more industrious, a little more innovative, and really try to meet us in the middle.
Thank you. Here's the last one for the evening. Samantha Hill, I wish I had more time this evening to attend the public meeting, but I wanted to send a quick email to have my voice heard, that I very much support the town and the steps they have taken since early 2022 to become compliant with this law. I very much approve the proposed zoning locations in town, and I'm happy to do anything else to support the effort as we continue moving this forward. Thank you to everyone who has worked so hard. All right. Any other? Yes, please.
I'm from Gaslight Village, also Alice McCown, 25 Gaslight Lane, and I feel the same way, and especially that one little piece. We identified that as something that someone would just grab right away, sitting right there right on Eastman Street, and now hearing all this, I realized that was, we covered our butts on all the others, because there's all that development, but that one's like sitting there just waiting. But I wanted to speak for the older people. I do a lot here at the Council on Aging, and I hear constantly people in the older homes that don't want to move from Easton, but they don't want to rent. In fact, I know a couple people that have finally moved into Zen, or whatever it's called now, and they're really looking for some ownership. And I think just apartments doesn't fit the bill. Young people even need to make that initial investment and get a mortgage and get some credit to move on. And a lot of, I wonder if there's any option for this housing to be homeownership, where they would have an option to buy their unit as opposed to just renting.
Thank you.
So multifamily is not restricted to apartments. It could be condominiums, it could be townhomes, it could even be tiny houses, as long as they provided all the utilities that were needed to comply with the building code.
But would we have any input on that, to say that the builder
Again, the
can
whole
make them-
point is that it's by right, and the developer would decide what was economic for them to build, if they wanted to move forward with it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, yes, please.
The special permitting thing is kind of a new consideration for me tonight. I'm just curious, how bad does the traffic have to get before this board doesn't issue special permits for that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There would have to be, I mean, and I know Stephanie would like to speak to this, but I think that there would have to be a traffic study. And this is one of the conversations that we as a group have had since day one, which is, well, how do we actually evaluate the traffic issue when we don't have a project on the table? And the answer is, you really can't. So I think as much as we, from an anecdotal perspective, think, okay, well, if there's more units potentially going in there, there's going to be more traffic on 106. I don't think that's an unreasonable assumption, but we don't know is the answer. And we don't know how it will ultimately impact or deteriorate the traffic on that road, because we don't know what the road is going to look like at that time. We don't know what the traffic patterns will look like at the time of that development. So a lot of what when we talk about traffic, and none of us up here have downplayed that issue whatsoever throughout this process. We hear you. But what I can tell you is it's a very difficult issue to quantify unless you have a traffic study in hand. Stephanie, do you have?
I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay. Connor.
Not to volunteer myself in the line of traffic fire, but unrelated to this, I hope folks who are here, who are living in this area, stay engaged as we go through the design process for the Foundry Street project. I know that sounds, and it is, a long time, but this is the same pipeline as Depot Street, right? So while we are all being very cautious to not overpromise, because you all know the reality is it's a narrow right of way. But to say that it will do nothing is I would say not accurate. Depot Street is a good corollary. Depot Street is in a lot of ways similar to what it was before, but it is a safer road to travel on now. You do see people running and walking on it. You do see people biking on it. So it's not, when we envision these things, and we do this publicly, so we'll have hearings periodically as we go through the state DOT design process, and I know we've done surveys and a lot of folks in this room have responded to them as far as where they'd like to see sidewalks and things like that. It's still gonna be a busy road, no matter what. You have 20,000 cars a day going through, you have for decades, you will for decades, nothing will change that. And I'm not gonna try and blow smoke and say sidewalks will fix it, but things can improve more than just putting the light in, right? You do a lot of geometry shifting, you look at road widening so that you have shoulders, turn lanes. It will always be very busy. But I don't want people walking away from here feeling defeated on that subject, saying that the town's response was, yeah, maybe you'll get a light in 10 years and that's the best we're ever gonna be able to get. So say engagement process, those are public hearings like this. Usually very few people go, but you are free to, you should.
We're pretty active, we'll be out there.
I know you will, but I just wanted to let folks know that that will continue separate and outside of this, and we hope that you participate, because we want to make that as safe as a road for everyone to travel on, however you want to get around.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for, yes, sir, please.
It's been discussed as part of the traffic program, and as was stated, that there's not enough cross-traffic on the two streets that are most impacted, and we're probably way too far down the road coming up to town meeting for this, but is there some way to go back to the state and say, listen, we implemented this MBTA overlay, but can we get 2 traffic lights on these 2 cross streets so these people can get in and out? And as I've heard, it could take 10 years, but at least it's something, that should go back to them.
Which 2 cross streets are you speaking about, sir?
Gaslight, and I'm not sure what.
So, I'm not the town's traffic engineer, but we do have to comply with state and federal standards as far as where the placements of these lights are. We have to do that actually for everything, including speed limit signs, for crosswalks. And while it makes some logical sense if you're coming out of that street to say, well, traffic light will fix this. If you go from what we have now, which is no traffic lights between Target and Five Corners, and then you have a traffic light added at Quanticut, which will be coming in advance of the 10-year state project as mitigation from Sawmill, a temporary light there.
Temporary?
Well, temporary, I'm using a technical term. It'll be a traffic light. But it's not going to be built to the same 50-year steel mast arms that the state project will 10 years on. It will still include turn lanes and all the improvements necessary for that project, but it will get replaced by the state traffic signal when that project comes through. So temporary in a 10-year sense. So if you go from what you have now, which is basically a straightaway from Target to Five Corners, and then you go to having a traffic light every few hundred feet, that would likely be very unsafe. That will be looked at if it has not already been vetted out at the 25% design phase of the state DOT project, but that's separate from the MBTA zone.
I just wanted to say that the posted speed limit,
If you-
Janice, Lamplighter Lane.
Thank you. Last name too. Could you just state your last name as well?
Mulberg.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say that there's posted speed limits of 40 miles per hour, like right in front of Lamplighter Lane. So people are jacking on it, and they do not. They see me trying to poke out, and they're like stepping on it, and they're looking at me like I'm doing something wrong. And it's going too fast. I mean, they're approaching Five Corners. They should not be going 40 miles an hour. Just saying.
Thank you. Yes.
Maria Wilson, 16 South Street. So what happens next? So you heard all our concerns. We presented our cases in front of you. What becomes of what we came here tonight to accomplish?
Yes, so, I mean, tonight we have to, in terms of the deadlines, we have to close the public hearing, right?
That was going to be done at the March 12th meeting.
Oh, at March 12th?
Yep.
So we have another public hearing,
No, the March 12th meeting would be to,
close it, and
Yeah.
then have a discussion.
Yeah.
So we have some additional time to kind of digest the feedback that we received tonight, essentially.
right, but not a board meeting. So your next board meeting is the 12th.
Oh, I thought it was the
Right.
4th. Did I miss
No.
that?
Yeah.
All right, we need to get on, yeah, okay, so the next board meeting is the 12th, and we have to have a vote, and we have to submit the final verbiage by the 12th.
So the plan was for the board to have final comments tonight.
Yep.
And then at the meeting on the 12th, you could close the hearing and deliberate and then take a vote.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the answer is, we have one more hearing in which, the idea would be that we'll digest the information that we got tonight. At that hearing on the 12th, we'll formally close the public hearing, and then as a board, we'll debate everything that was discussed. If we need to make adjustments, we'll make adjustments, and then we'll vote on the proposals, and that will be what we submit for the town meeting. Yes.
I'm not trying to drag the evening on, but for people who don't go to board meetings for a living, can you just delineate closing the hearing and then deliberating? Your deliberating happens in open session. It's just at that point,
Yes.
the public comment section is over, and you still have a right to watch and listen as the board goes through weighing the testimony. I don't know how much everyone here goes to these meetings. I want to make sure that's.
But you can't bring any new information
That's
in.
right.
You can't you can't make your opinions. They deliberate and
Tonight's the
no one
last
can
night.
interrupt. Yep, tonight's the last night for a conversation about it with the public.
Well, technically though, if you're not closing it until the 12th, someone could email you and say, please consider something as
Yes.
well. There's still
That's right.
time.
That's exactly right. Yes. I guess the point that Connor was making is that it's not like these deliberations are, in some back room. They're all in front of everyone for everyone to see.
And that the
Right,
focus
and
of
that
your
meeting-
agenda is probably for deliberating, whereas this was a couple hours of hearing.
That's right.
Right. And that meeting is going to be at the town offices in the Colleen Corona Room, and it will be in person, and there will be hybrid options, so, just so everyone knows.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. We're talking, and it doesn't really pertain as much to this as it does to the people. Is it lamplighter? What's the other one? Gaslight. Probably just a quick fix to really help the people is at Five Corners. If you just made all 4 ways stop for 30 seconds, they would probably have more of a chance to pull out down there because traffic wouldn't be coming from Five Corners.
I actually asked Dave Field about it, if I may, and he said they can't do that because the traffic backs up on Five Corners coming towards where Bay Road comes in, so there's.
Backs up everywhere.
No, I know, but I asked him that question before, and he said they cannot do something to provide some traffic relief for us from the people who have the right on the green arrow coming by the mobile station there.
Yeah.
So I asked, and he said, no, can't do it.
Yes.
And I just, because everybody has had a say in here and we've heard a lot, I'm just wondering if we can give us some feedback about what you've heard from us tonight, like things that you might consider or reconsider, or what your thoughts are.
I mean, as I said at the outset, we're willing to consider everything that's, come in tonight. And I think we've gotten a lot of constructive feedback. We have throughout the process. I mean, I will say that your group in particular, I'm referring to that general Foundry Street area on 106, has been really active and it's been helpful. I hope you're seeing some of that in the way that we have amended the plans to this point. And I think my position is, that it's all being heard by all of us. And I know, speaking for myself, I have a completely open mind on the things that have been presented tonight in a very thoughtful and constructive way. So, I mean, beyond that, that's about, I think, the best that I could give you right now.
So we can go to the March 12th meeting?
Of course. And it's going to be by hybrid because it's in the Colleen Corona Room, so if you can't make it, you can also watch it. All right, well, I thank everyone. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, do we have meeting minutes?
Do we have minutes?
So-
We have minutes.
We're not quite done yet.
We have minutes. Please.
Oh yeah, we still have to finish our meeting. Oh,
How
dang
are
it.
you? We still have to wrap up our meeting.
We just have to wrap up our meeting. Do you know where the chairs go?
The DPW takes care of it.
We'll put the red ones back.
We have to just finish our meeting.
Oh, no, sure, sorry.
Let's
We'll let it quiet down.
Excuse me, everybody, we need to finish the meeting.
So we could let's just leave everything here? Yeah, just.
Yes, thank you.
Short meeting or?
Yeah, we just have to run through our meeting minutes, so if you guys are more than welcome to leave, but if you could just keep the we have to finish our meeting. Thank you all. Thank you for listening to us. All right, so we're just gonna kind of wrap up our meeting here. You guys are all free to leave. All right, so the last kind of issue on our agenda is the meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look through them?
But motion to approve. The more names on the list.
All right,
Better.
any further discussion? Okay, motion to approve the meeting minutes, that's an aye.
Joanne, I?
Wolf, aye. Kid, aye.
Thank you. So,
Joanne, second.
and if I could, I mean, the planning director updates, do we have anything beyond what we've talked about tonight?
No, the only thing I have to say is, I'll be talking with the chair about the board doing a work plan for the upcoming next 12 months. I think it's been a while because there's been so many other things that the board has been working on. It's maybe time to do another. It's supposed to be, yeah, but we've just been, yeah. So.
I think that'd be great.
Work plan. We're making a work plan.
All right, we've done a lot of hard work tonight. Thank you all. Do we have,
Motion, second.
That's an aye.
Sigmund, I?
Wolf, aye.
Kid, aye.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned.
You guys are great.